your knowledge and your wisdom in what we do today, Lord. Right. Amen.
Please join with me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good morning, Bob, and I guess you're on first.
Good morning. I'm Bob Keating. I'm Community Development Director. I've got great news for you today. I don't have a PowerPoint.
Oh.
And as a matter of fact, we actually tried to give you a better week by not giving you stacks of paper to read either. We initially didn't provide any backup for this meeting because I think the direction that we got before was to bring the consultants here to have them answer some questions they have. We decided later on, just recently, to put the last staff report as backup, just so that you can see what the options that we outlined last time were. And you do have several options on how to proceed today. And what I'd like to do is just run over those options again here at the beginning and then turn it over to our consultants for a real brief presentation. I think you did get a copy of the backup, and on page 5, and it's also listed as page 1, it was page 151 in your last packet. It identifies 5 options that we listed the last time as to how you can proceed with the proposed impact fee update report. And really, those aren't all exclusive. You can you could even mix and match among those alternatives. And basically, yes.
I'm trying to find page 5 or 151. Has anybody found it yet?
Nope.
It was, I think your assistant should have had it to give to you, because mine was on my desk this morning when I came in.
Okay.
It was the backup from the March meeting.
Is there a page? What does it say on that, Commissioner?
It's dated March 28th, and it's agenda page 151.
Hang on a second.
Well, can you call your assistant for all of us, please?
Well, I think you have it right there, Madam Chair.
Where?
Madam Chair, right there to your left.
Is this it?
Is that dated March 28th?
Starts with 147?
Yes, that's it right there.
Okay, I got it. Good.
I'm sorry about not providing these before. Like I said, we're operating on just a question and answer format. Last minute, we decided to provide these.
Okay.
We dropped them off at the commission office yesterday, and we're getting them right now. I've got some, bring them right now.
Yeah, I have mine.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to look at it?
In a minute.
Let me just run through these briefly. Really, they fall in several categories. First is you could decide to not accept the report, not do anything with the impact fees, and leave everything as it is now. Staff doesn't recommend that. You could also accept the report and let us make some changes to level of service and some other minor characteristics that are recommended in the report, and then just revisit the report at some other time. And then there are a couple of other options we have to accept the report and phase in the fees, whether you start phasing them in now, a year from now, or 2 years from now, and whether they get phased in at a lower percentage or higher percentage. That's up to you. And kind of a variation of that is to accept the staff report and then provide discounts until we get up to 100%, and that's just another way to do the phase-in. And really, a final option that we've identified, and really it's what staff recommends, is eliminating 2 impact fee categories here, eliminating solid waste and eliminating libraries. And Jason can go into these in a minute if you'd like. The reason is neither one are big revenue producers. The second is libraries in particular have operating costs that come with them. And our recommendation here is if you eliminate those, put the money that would be foregone by eliminating those into the traffic impact fee category, where there's not associated operating costs, and there's probably more need than any of the other capital items. Along with that,
Bob, did you just say that eliminate those two fees and just take those dollars we would have gotten and put them in the traffic side?
yes, still being consistent with the consultant's staff report as to what the traffic impact fees should be. That would be a revenue neutral alternative for right now, eliminating those, but we suggest that you accept the report and decide to phase in the fees recommended at the report at some rate, whether or not you start today or in the future. And Ro, that's staff's recommendation. Jason, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Right. The rationale for eliminating those two impact fees is first, the corrections one is so small it creates administrative issues. Really, the landfill fees are structured to cover those costs, and we could eliminate that. I think it's something like $90 for a single family home, $82. The other one is libraries. We are currently, the community college is currently constructing a new West Library on the Mueller campus, and we're using impact fees for some of our portion of that facility. Impact fees require you to spend them every 6 years, so the thought is you would have to do a new library or a library expansion every 6 years. And with library expansions come significant operating costs in most cases. It costs us about $1.2 million a year to operate a branch library. So our thought was, rather than keeping that library impact fee requiring us to do library expansion after library expansion and adding to our operating costs are such a big issue right now with Amendment 1 and our need to cut back. We're worried about being able to staff that new West County Library, and then we're concerned about moving forward. It wouldn't mean that there wouldn't be any available funds for libraries in the future. There's still one-cent sales tax funds, and those fees could be added back at a later date at a time that the commission felt appropriate. And it's really a prioritization of need. We think that the traffic impact fees are the biggest need. We need to get our road network in and taken care of. They also don't have significant operating costs attached to them. We build them. They're not requiring us to add an additional operating cost that has to be funded at ad valorem, like, for example, like libraries do.
I guess in summary, staff's position is that we don't think, because of the environment we're in right now, that we should increase any of these impact fees. We should accept the study, eliminate libraries, and eliminate solid waste, not increase the impact fees at this time, because we're collecting about 20% of what we were collecting a few years ago. And let's say we increase it, may drop to 10%. You're no further ahead as far as needing money for your capital expansion. Down the road, however, have them increase to that level, maybe 18 months to 2 years, start increasing it. That's our suggestion at this time, and that's mainly due to the economy. We feel that right now, if we did increase impact fees, it could slow our economy up even further, and we feel that could really hurt the community.
Any questions of staff at this point, commissioners? Bob?
If you've got no questions of me, the bad news is the consultant does have a PowerPoint, but it's pretty short. And you've met Clancy Mullen from Duncan and Associates before.
Good morning.
And
I would, Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'd just like to make a comment before both sides start. There's two things that I'm specifically going to be looking for in both reports. One is the cost of building the roads. Transportation and schools are the highest, but the cost of building the roads. And I've seen prices that have come in that are half what we anticipated and so on and so forth, but I need to know as they go through this, are we looking at just construction cost or construction engineering and purchasing right away or whatever? So I'd like to know what the construction costs are, which that's basically what we base our fee on. And the other one I'd like to know is that I'm going to be looking for is a better definition of how we generate trips. Because, like I said, I got to think about what I said at the last meeting about generating trips going, a mile away and going to 3 different businesses. Well, suppose, and just for both sides for food for thought, because I want to get an answer to this through the presentations. Suppose I go to Rhinewood Plaza and I have lunch at the Italian Grill and I drop my watch off at the jeweler to have repaired, and then I go into Publix and buy groceries and go home. How many trips is that? I haven't moved my car once.
But boy, you've been busy.
Huh?
Yeah, been busy.
Efficient use of the gas cost, too.
And
Right.
that's a good point. I didn't know if you were finished up.
Yeah.
That's a couple things. And then I would like to know how, it appears the school district is going to the COPS, am I saying that right, for their method of financing, which is basically obligating future tax revenues. So as everybody comes forward with their presentation, I'd like to know, a couple things. Are they working? I understand they bought property right off of 66th Avenue at X price, but also the last, or the 3 sites that I think are going to be the future next schools, in fact, came from property that is free. And has that been worked in? And in addition to that, whenever somebody pays a fee and they come into the community day on the school side of it, and they're paying that school impact fee, but then in addition to that, they are also paying their tax bill with those future dollars that the school district has already anticipated. So I just want to make sure that in my mind that they're not actually paying twice for the same level of service that in the future.
So to clarify this, we want total cost of of roads from beginning to end. And if that's factored in, and we want to understand completely the numbers, where they came from, if they're valid, today, this, that, and the other. Lay it all out. Everything's on the table. Thank you.
Commissioners, for the record, Clancy Mullen with Duncan Associates. Bob, can we cue up this PowerPoint?
Oh, yeah.
To address some of the points that you raised, or at least try to, we have certainly tried to include all of the costs. I'm not sure I quite understand that question. We've included right-of-way costs. We've included all of the costs related to roads.
Now, let me answer that. We do include all the costs. We include design, we include right-of-way acquisition, and we include construction. Yes.
And engineering.
Yeah, design.
Well, then, Bob, when for instance, and I'm looking at the State Road 60 that came in at I think Joe was on the radio yesterday and came in about half of what we expected, I believe. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, it came in at 17 million. I think we had about
34 million or something like that. So when we were looking at this, for example, were we looking at the 34 million to build that, and now it's at 17 million? I find that that's what I want to understand is how.
Well, let me answer a few questions. First of all, your land costs, your construction costs are based on your historical data. Obviously, that changes over time. When the economy, when we were behind a few years ago because construction costs were so high. I will say that land costs, we're trying to get right away. We're not finding that they've declined as much to the private people as to us because they've all gotten attorneys and things like that. So they haven't declined. Now, construction costs have declined, but we take all the costs, our historical costs, and we put them in there. This is based on historical data, and I think you get in trouble when you start trying to project in the future and you don't have defined data. And Route 60 also is not included in our impact fee calculation because it's a state road. All that is a loan to the state that's going to be repaid.
I was just using that as an example.
Okay. But the other thing is, the method of financing, like we mentioned, the schools, that's COPS, Certificates of Participation. All that is a method to get around a general obligation. It has nothing to do with the construction costs because they're going to pay over time for the full cost of that school.
But Okay, so just to help me understand that, and drawing on your financial expertise, am I correct in saying that I move into the community today, or change houses? Let's suppose I build a new house, and I pay the impact fees that we establish here. And on my future tax bill, I'm going to be paying ad valorem dollars to that level of service because they're paying for it in future dollars.
Well, no, because first of all, we do not include any construction costs in our ad valorem dollars. We're one of the few counties.
But the school does.
Yeah, that's
Well, the school does, and I can't answer the school.
No,
I cannot answer the school. Please, I don't have us.
But that's substantial because that's
and let me tell you, every one of the fees that we have formulas in here, and we give credits. And we give credits for a number of things because, according to law, you cannot charge a fee when the fee payer is paying from another source for the same result.
Okay.
So our formula has a basis for, say, the 2 mil tax that the school board charges for capital outlay. We give a percentage of that as a credit.
Okay.
Because, as you know, they're looking at renovating, I think, Osceola and one of the other.
I think tearing
schools.
it down and building it somewhere else.
Now those you would not get a credit for that portion of the 2 mil tax because those are not capacity producing.
But you back
They're
it
just
out of the
replacement. But where they are building a new school and using part of the 2 mil revenue that they generate, that is a credit against their impact fee. If you actually look at schools, Clancy could give me the numbers, but the per student cost to build schools is maybe double what the impact fee is because there's a significant credit there for the other revenue that is derived from the fee payers that goes to build schools.
Okay, and I've got one other question then. We're still paying, I believe, on a bond from the school district that was passed, voter approved? Several. So, okay, and that went to build new student stations like Sebastian River High School, Gifford or Oslo Middle School. Now, since somebody comes in and they pay the impact fee today on education, are they going to be exempt from paying that part of the ad valorem tax bill in the future?
Actually, that's probably for existing capacity, and also that revenue source. That'll be as a credit because it'll be part of your equation. Two things. One is a lot of that capacity is taken up already. We built the schools are at capacity, so they probably will not be in this equation. It's the new schools from this day on. Any portion of the bond issue that was used for additional capacity from this day on might be factored in.
Well, they've already spent those bonds.
Yeah, they've already spent them, and the schools are, for instance,
and
when you did Sebastian.
Right. But we're still paying for it. And any taxpayer that starts today or whenever is paying for it.
Yes, but we're not including that in our costs. We'll include that as our average, but it's not in the equation as far as the future need of capital because it's already full.
Right, but we're paying, that did go to establishing a level of service.
Yes, it did.
That they are paying for a level of service that they're paying for twice.
Well, if I could clarify on that. Clancy Mullen with Duncan Associates. If I could clarify on that, we did give credit for, the debt service for existing, it doesn't matter if it's existing schools or new schools, the debt service that comes out of the 2 mil is credited. So the portion of debt service that's not, although we're not including the interest portion, because we didn't include interest in the cost calculations. So we didn't include on the cost side, we're not including it on the credit side. But as far as any principal repayment of capacity expanding improvements, past or future, we did give credit for that.
And what about the bond?
Well, that's a different level of service, and that's why we go with bonds a lot of times in the school system because it's higher than the state.
Right.
And we value the school system here much.
No, yeah. In fact, without that, we wouldn't have been able to do Sebastian High School's auditorium, or I understand.
Total school.
Yeah, exactly. I understand that, but my question is that's still on the tax bill whenever somebody moves into this community?
It's on the tax. What taxes are you referring to on the 2 mil?
No, not the capital outlay. There was a bond issue passed.
Well, paying for that
bond issue,
right.
ad valorem bond.
Yes. There's an ad valorem.
What you're going to see is if the bond issue is passed and all the construction's been done for those facilities that the bond issue was passed for, we won't be recharging for that construction. And if we do charge for it, it'll only be the portion is attributable, and they'll get credit on the revenue attributable to the additional students that can be put in that school for future growth. And they will have put on the credit side for the revenue is a bond issue that was done for that portion of the construction. And I think that's how it would work. But I think to answer your question, it is taken into consideration in the formula.
You think?
Okay. Thank you, if you'll.
Okay. Well, let me just, I think there's been some question about, how the traffic impact fees calculator, focus on that, and the specific question about, are we double counting trips? And the fact is that we're not double counting trips. Basically, we take the trip generation rates that are in the ITE manual, Institute for Transportation Engineers. Those trip generation rates, we divide them by 2, because you have an origin and a destination for each trip. So if you just counted the trip ends, which is what ITE reports. In other words, if you go to a store, that's counted as a trip, and then when you leave, that's counted as another trip. That's 2 trip ends. So we divide that by 2, so to make sure we're not double counting, the trip that starts at home and that ends at the store. That's really just 1 trip. In our formula, we have the 85%, the 15% discount. I mean, that's built in. That's a policy issue. We didn't change that.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
What you just said a minute ago, the trip in, 2 trips, so on and so forth. When you build a shopping plaza, do you get a trip for each unit that's in there when you go, or do you get a trip for the entire plaza?
You get a trip for the entire. The trip generation rates that IT publishes are for the entire shopping center. Okay. So anybody that goes into the shopping center, that's 1 trip. They're not count. If they move from store to store, that's not counted as separate trips.
Thank you.
It's only when they get back out on the road system. So I don't know if you have any questions about the formula. I could go into the formula in some detail, but the basic factors in increasing the fee as part of this update is the fact that costs have gone up. And the sort of the issue of we didn't really make any real changes to the form. We didn't make any changes to the formula itself. One of the things that we did do is we calibrated trip lengths. We look at that second bullet here. We used the same travel demand characteristics that came out of the previous study that Tyndale Oliver did, but we calibrated the travel demand for each land use by a factor. We reduced it by 24% to account for the fact that we weren't seeing as much travel on the roadways as would be predicted by those generation rates. And that may be because there's a lot of vacant units today, and so we're expecting those units would be generating traffic, but they're not today. So we calibrated to current conditions, and that resulted in reducing those travel demand factors. There was a question that had come up about how do you compare your non-residential road impact fees versus the residential road impact fees. I think there was some question that maybe you thought maybe these fees were sort of out of line with what other communities were charging in Florida. And so I did a comparison, and what this comparison shows, it just gives you a ratio. It doesn't show the actual fees. It shows the ratio of the non-residential fee per 1,000 square feet to a single family fee, to a typical single family unit. So for example, on this on the red bars here, that represents a 100,000 square foot shopping center. Well, 100,001 square foot, because a lot of times we break the categories at 100,000 square feet. Maybe it's, 99,000 or maybe it's 100. So just to be sure we're up into that next category. So we're showing Indian River County, which is the first bar, at a little over 1 point, about 1.4, 3 or 4. And what that means is that the fee for a shopping center, for 1,000 square foot of a shopping center, is a little over 1 times the fee for a single family unit. Well, if you look at Martin County, Martin is 3 times the single family unit. So relative to your residential fees, your non-residential fees are not out of line.
Yeah, what's the cost of a residential unit there?
What is the cost of a residential unit in Martin County?
Yes. And I'm just wondering what the dollar figure is.
I don't have that in front of me.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, that looks good in itself.
But it just, this isn't showing you the absolute fees.
Right.
But I think the question was raised, well, are we out of whack, in terms of the residential versus non-residential?
Yeah, but you don't have any dollar figures to just ratios on this.
That's what, that's all these are. Similarly, for the general office building, you look at Indian River County. This is on the proposed fees. It's basically a 1-to-1 ratio. 1,000 square foot of office building pays the same as a typical single family unit, and that's pretty consistent with Martin, Volusia, and Brevard. Orange is higher, Palm Beach is lower. But basically, it's pretty consistent. You're not really out of line.
Well, do you have the? Because to me, when I look at this, the way it's like saying that, I don't know. Trying to think of an example.
You're twice the height of me, but you don't know what my height is.
Yeah, the water's 3 foot deeper than it was. But how deep was it to know how? Maybe an impact fee here is 3 times what it is in Martin County, and that's why ours is only a little over 1 times more. I don't know. That's the problem. We don't know what the base is to know how accurate this is.
Jason, can you help out on that at all?
Not a number.
I think I remember seeing an article where the proposed rate, when Martin updated their fee for a single family home, the proposed rate was $24,000 for a single family unit total with all the impact fees together. I'm pretty sure they adopted something less than that. I'm not sure what the number is, though.
But the problem, and again, the only problem I have with the chart is we don't know what the baseline is, so we don't really know what it's telling us, other than their fees are higher than ours based on something that we don't know.
Well, we've done a comparison. Well, I guess most of the comparisons we did were for single family. We did a couple of months ago. We did a presentation showing, how Indian River stacks in terms of single family fees for roads compared to all the other counties in Florida.
I got it right here.
You're above average, definitely. You're more on the high end.
Yeah, yes, we are.
Right now. So, and I do have, I've got the figures that I used to generate this chart. I thought the issue was raised. Well, we're out of line relative to our residential fees, and so I was trying to just show that that's not the case. Whether you're,
But what you're saying
fees are higher or not.
On a percentage wise, we're probably not.
Well, I think if your fee is higher for residential, it's going to be higher for, if you look at this chart and we're in line, it's going to be higher for commercial. So if you do the residential and you show that our percentage, as far as non-residential to residential, the non-residential, since they seem to get a smaller share from a shopping center, then if they're higher for residential, they're going to be higher for everything else, for non-residential.
Yeah, and I think the consultant was trying to do this to show, I think there was a concern raised by the board about the fairness of the fees between residential versus commercial, that commercial is paying an unfair burden. And I think what they're trying to do is show the relationship between residential versus commercial and how that compares to other communities.
Someplace in our past material, we had the fees from other counties for particularly.
Yeah, that was in the last report. I remember seeing that, and it had where we are and where we would be. I believe we'd be like the 3rd highest in the state if we.
Yeah, and we'll try and search that information as we go on in the meeting and have it up.
I don't have that on here.
Oh, he's going to bring his DVD?
Martin, on one of these previous PowerPoints, on the total of all impact fees, where Indian River County's current was about 10,000 before the proposal, before the study, it's showing Martin at, looks like about 12,000.
Right, which is, already more than that, I think.
The study has a higher rate than that.
What is it right now, though, without any increases? I got, what is it?
It was 9,000,
A little under 10,000.
9,760, I think.
Brevard's current is $98.78. St. Lucy's is $9,014. Martin County's $11,499. Palm Beach is $98.90. Proposed is $19,236. Indian River County is $98.78 and proposed is $16.55. And this was as of January 21st of this year.
And just out of pure curiosity, on those other fees, is water and sewer affiliated with those other fees at all? I know they're not with ours, because by the time you put water and sewer into that, you add another $5,000 approximately.
Right.
The table says non-utility fees.
Right.
See, now it makes, what, for instance, with Martin County compared with Indian River County, which is kind of our sister county, their current fee is $11,499 according to this, and ours is $9,878, but yet their fee for commercial on the red line is almost 3 times what ours is, and that's based on a higher cost per house. So they're really much higher than we are for commercial.
Or would they be lower? Because if that's their dollar amount.
Well, that's $3 per on $11,499, which is their current. Doesn't have the proposed.
Yeah, now these ratios are just
came from Bob.
just for the road fees. We're just looking at the road fees here.
Oh, that's just traffic?
Oh, okay, I'm looking at the overall fee. Okay,
Well, that didn't help.
that'll help some.
Yeah.
Which, is the biggest fee for commercial, but not the only one.
But we're comparing it to residential, and I believe with us comparing ours to residential, traffic's not necessarily the biggest fee. Well, it is but when you take the rest of them, it's not the biggest amount when you add the rest of them together.
Do we have any other questions of staff at this point, or our consultant? We are sorry to interrupt you continuously, but
Well, I just had, on this, I just had a couple of these, a couple of slides here that represented sort of the alternatives of, the
Okay.
percents of the maximum fees you could charge to be revenue neutral, and I prepared this. I don't know if this was ever done in a presentation, but probably in your last. So that's just, available here on this slides if you want to see it. And this was the alternative that Jason was talking about. You would adopt these the fees, the maximum fees at these percentages to get the staff sort of alternative revenue neutral approach. But that's really all I have in terms of a presentation. I'm not sure we answered all the questions. The school land costs issue.
I need someone to give me the impact fee buck quick.
I was not aware that the school was getting free land or land, not having to pay for its next 3 school sites. I had not heard that.
Just to give you an idea of where it is and what it is, I believe they may be moving the Osceola Magnet to Point West. That land was donated. I don't know whether that was established or put in their level of service. They've got land from Waterway Village that was set aside for an elementary school, and then they've got land being extracted from some in exchange for annexations in Fellsmere.
But we want to make it clear that they haven't absolutely locked this in and haven't committed to these, but it's available.
Actually, let me make a couple points. When they're moving Osceola, that would not be a capacity increase. So they would just be moving it from the current site of Osceola to the Point West site. So you would factor in the Points West side only if it were a new school providing additional capacity, not in essence a replacement school.
Okay, so they're building a new school. They're probably going to increase the core capacity from 550 to 700, which they've talked about doing that with the prototypical elementary school. And then in addition to that, they're going to do it with future tax dollars through the COPS program on donated land. So, I mean, I understand that, but something tells me as soon as they say they're not doing that, then they're going to go back to the other side at Osceola Magnet, where the current site is, and somehow factor that in the equation to increase the level of service.
Right, they might. But let me make one other point before I forget it, too. The Fellsmere donations are not donations. We have been working with the school district and the Anson property, and Anson is looking at getting impact fee credits for his donation. So basically he will be compensated if the school district does pull the trigger and get that. So whereas the county got property without giving credits or paying for it with South County Initiative, Point West, Waterway Village, and Liberty Park, the precedent seems to be with Fellsmere there will be credits.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning the South County, because I'd forgotten about that one. Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, at this point, do you have any other questions of staff or consultant? What is your pleasure of opening the mics up to the public?
I'd love to hear from you.
We're going to take a tally here.
Are we going to hear the other side before we open it up, or are we going to do them one at a time?
Well, I'm right now wanting to know the process we're going to use. I'm not going to call it completely myself. Mr. Wheeler, what would you like to do?
I'd like to hear from both sides so everybody knows what everybody's saying.
Yes.
And then hear it in the public.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I would like the opportunity to hear from anyone who has taken the time to be here in this room regarding impact fees.
Okay.
Concur.
Okay. Is there someone who wants to give a presentation from the other side? Or from another side?
I don't know if there is an other side.
No.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Kirk Sorensen, and I've been asked by the Treasure Coast Builders Association to conduct a technical review of the impact fee update study that was presented by Duncan and Associates. I didn't actually come prepared for a presentation per se, but I'd like to answer some questions and maybe bring some points up as we discuss some of the assumptions and data sources and main issues relative to the proposed update. First of all, as you know, and as has been discussed, a couple options exist. Number one, you can come to the conclusion that this is not the best time to do anything with impact fees. I think that's a pretty universal opinion at this point in time. Secondly, you can take a look more thoroughly at the data, at the assumptions, the methodology, the calculations within the update, and you can bring some attention to some of the areas we feel are somewhat misrepresented in the study. Now, that's not to say that we're intentionally misrepresented by any means, but I think some of the data that was perhaps presented by either the school board or the county staff may have been outdated. It may have been projected on cost increases that do not exist. As far as roads are concerned, they were based on non-capacity improvements to road systems. They were based on inclusion of state roads, which, as Mr. Baer just indicated, State Road 60 is not included or should not be included in the updated study, yet the cost of a state road is included. It is our contention that there are state revenue sources that are designed to provide additional capacity to state roads. It's not the responsibility of new development to make up that shortfall. It's not represented in your CIP. It may be something that the county anticipates occurring, but if it ever occurs, then is the time to update this study to reflect the use of impact fee dollars on state roads. And relative to state roads, to be equally fair, we, in our analysis, reduced the credit for the state road gas taxes that are collected. At the same time, you take state roads out of the equation, you must eliminate travel on state roads. So that is an estimated amount of travel, but based on industry norms, it's typically in this type of community about 25% of your travel. Therefore, your trip length would be reduced by a 25% margin. This is in addition to the reduction that the consultant already applied for the unique demographic characteristics of Indian River County. Given, the capacity issue is another issue that was not really discussed very thoroughly, at least in this discussion today, but we feel after looking at the FDOT capacity manuals that the capacity that's being represented in the update is also understated. The road capacity, once these roads are improved, will increase by more than the average, which is about 7,000 trips per lane on an average day. And if you look at, and I think Dr. Nicholas can probably validate this, in Martin County it was 11,000 and some trips per day based on the weighted average of FDOT's capacity, projected capacity. So once, if everything else stayed the same in the study, and only that capacity adjustment was made, your road impact fees would increase by 9%. If the cost was updated based only on new roads, thereby eliminating the factor that some of these costs are non-capacity because they're repaving or replacing existing roads. If only new roads were included, which is more of a pure way of looking at the road construction costs, your lane mile cost would be $2.1 million versus the $3.9 million presented in the update.
Mr. Sorensen, when you say new roads, are you talking about new lanes or just physically new roads?
New roads, no expansion, no widening projects, simply new roads as represented in the update. There was a listing of roads, both new and widened roads.
So turning a 2-lane into 4-lane, you would not suggest?
No. And if you do include those lanes, I would suggest you look at the amount of capacity that is increased, and you can make an adjustment to those widening projects to reduce the costs for capacity not related to new development. In any case, your lane mile, as Commissioner Wheeler indicated, is substantially less than what's being proposed in the study. Now, that can be substantially less based on the numbers in the study, which may be outdated, or it could be substantially less based on the current bid estimates or contracts that are being issued by Indian River County today. Of course, the study is not based on a number that may be coming in 2 or 3 months ago, but it may be based on costs that were expected 2 years ago. So it's and of course, when you conduct one of these studies, you have to draw a line in the sand. This is when we're going to stop taking data, and this is what it should be. But either option, no matter which one you choose, would provide you with a substantially less lane mile cost than proposed in the update.
Madam Chair,
At the end of this, take notes.
The trip characteristics, of course, like I said, the adjustments were made. There were some issues perhaps with commercial, and this was discussed today as well. There's been recent studies conducted, and I think once again Dr. Nicholas could shed some light on this, in South Florida, which indicates commercial trip rates and commercial trip lengths are substantially lower than they have been in the recent past. In the recent past, I mean by the preceding impact fee updates that have occurred. So that's something to take a look at as well. Relative to the school impact fees, once again, we feel that the costs are based on only a small sample. And of course, if you don't have a lot of construction for new schools, then you won't have a large sample. As an alternative, you can either take a small sample and see what occurs based on that, or you can take a look at communities in the neighboring counties and see what they're spending. a school is a school. It's going to cost the same here as it does in Martin County or St. Lucie. You might have differences in land values, but that's a small percentage of the student station cost. You know, the student station cost, as presented, increased by 30% per year versus the last one. You know, FDOE anticipates construction costs at an increase of less than 6% per year. So there's a misconnect there as far as what's being proposed and what's accepted by the state, what's accepted by other communities as well. There are issues, you know, when you arrive at a cost, and you know, it's common practice to use what's called a utilization rate. In other words, if you have more kids out there than you have permanent stations, you're over capacity. By being over capacity, you have a number of portable units. To account for the number of portable units, which in actuality reduces your level of service, because your level of service is typically based on a permanent station. So if you have a utilization rate over 100%, you're over capacity, and there should be either a level of service adjustment to account for the overcapacity or a cost adjustment to account for the overcapacity. Not only are portables less expensive, and you may have a policy issue with portables. You may not want them, but whether you want them or not is inconsequential. The fact is they exist. And if I moved to Indian River County tomorrow, my kid has a 14% chance of sitting in a portable. Yet I'm paying for a permanent station.
Just to clarify that a little bit, your portables can be caused by the programs you do. And you can cause overcapacity if you put programs in that make overcapacity. So that has to be factored in, and it's a judgment call.
And not only that, portables are almost a requirement because the state won't let you build a school until you
have overcapacity.
And so you've got to have overcapacity at 2 or 3 different schools to put a school in the middle of it to take that capacity away.
There's no question. Portables are probably going to be around forever. You know.
And have been.
Yeah, and they will be, and whether you like them or not, they're going to be there, and eventually maybe there'll be less of them there. And when that occurs, then you'll have less of a impact on the level of service or the cost over time. But you know, this is a snapshot in time. This is what you have right now. So your impact fee has to be based on what you have right now, whether it's a mandate by the state or by the county or by the programs the schools are supporting. The fact remains, you have a portable that costs less. You have a portable, they offer a level of service that can be interpreted as less than a permanent level of service. Therefore, from strictly an accounting perspective, there should be an adjustment based on the number of portable units. The credit issue is an issue with schools also that needs to be further examined. I think that if you look at the work program from 2007, there are millions of dollars that are allocated to the repayment of cops, okay? Through our calculations, the percentage of your CIT, which is your 2 mil, basically, is greater than the 28% representing the update. It's more like 58% when you include the debt service payments. And those debt service payments, for the most part, would be dedicated to new capacity, although there may be a percentage that goes for reconstruction and so forth, maintenance, but most of those are for new schools. And an issue also was raised relative to new schools. Even though you build a new school in another part of the county to replace an existing school, it was suggested that it's not included, when in actuality they're using the new school cost when calculating the student station cost. So yes, the capacity isn't changing, but should new development be held to a higher standard relative to cost simply because you have to replace existing schools? It's a two-sided coin. From a accounting perspective, once again, maybe they shouldn't be, and from a fairness perspective, I don't think they should be at all. These are things that you need to weigh, because as you look at some of the assumptions, and some are not as clear perhaps as others, if you stand back and maybe take a 10,000-foot perspective, you'll see that some are more equitable, some are more proportionate, some are more fair than other perspectives. And that's, I think, the objective of any community contemplating the adjustment of an impact fee schedule is to ensure its fairness, its proportionality, its equity, and take all those into consideration prior to adoption.
Thank you. Any questions at this point? Mr. Lesher? Davis?
Yes, ma'am. Kirk, I'm going to be as tough on you, I suppose, as I was with the other presenter. I do not follow your logic on why we would not include lane expansion into the impact fee calculations.
Well, lane expansion often includes the reconstruction of existing roads. Now, our calculations did not, for instance, take a 2-mile per lane road construction project and cut it in half and saying, well, half is probably for this reconstruction effort, because we realize that maybe there's right-of-way that needs to be purchased, there's other standards that needs to be maintained. So it was only really a reduction of 38% based on the widening projects, okay?
Oh, right. So what you're saying then is whenever we have a road project that goes in, if it's a 2-lane road today, then we take it and jump it up to a 4-lane road. We are putting the full cost of that 4-lane road into our fees for our cost.
The full cost of the 4-lane road is going into the new lanes.
And ignoring the cost of the 2-lane, or what the 2-lane
exactly
equity was.
Exactly. Ignoring the replacement of the existing lanes if they're replaced. You know, I mean, it's common knowledge, it's a fundamental principle of impact fees that you cannot spend impact fees on projects that do not increase your capacity.
Right.
This is the hazy part. This is the cloudy area where, you know, a project is big. Part of it is for increasing capacity. Part of it is for not increasing capacity. You have the ability to segregate those costs.
And Joe or somebody.
He looks at it, we use other revenues besides impact fees for the new road. He looks as if, and let's say you do go from a 2- to a 4-lane road and you have to move the 2-lane. Should the local resident have to pay for moving the existing 2-lane that wouldn't have had to be moved if it wasn't for the new capacity? No. He also says in his study, which is absolutely ridiculous, don't include sidewalks, don't include landscaping, don't include stormwater. Well, I don't think you folks want that.
Are you
saying
want roads
do not
include those?
Now, I'm just saying that you need to look at all the cost components. You know, I've seen road projects, and there may be some in this list that reflect a $10 million per lane cost because they have to build these replace existing bridges, or because there's a huge drainage issue or there's a safety issue. Sure, you want to correct those at the time. I'm not saying do not correct these issues. I'm saying don't pass all those costs on only to new development.
If you used his logic, I think the best thing to do, and we don't do that, by the way, usually the bridge is replaced due to the fact of the existing capacity required it. I mean the new capacity, not the existing. We wouldn't replace it if there wasn't any growth. It'd stay just the way it would, just resurface it and rebuild it. So when we go and we have to put a whole new bridge in due to the fact we have to widen for future capacity, do you think the local resident should pay? I don't. The other thing is we blend gas. If we do what this gentleman says, we should take gas tax out of the equation, totally out of it, an optional sales tax, and just use that for our existing roads. And I'll tell you what's going to happen to that impact fee when we do this. It's going to go straight up if you use his logic. We blend, because of this, we blend gas tax, optional sales tax, and impact fees in every road to try and compensate for what he's saying. But if he thinks we shouldn't do landscaping in our roads, and that's a quality of life issue and a policy decision by this commission, we shouldn't do sidewalks for the safety of our residents when we widen. We shouldn't do stormwater, which I don't know what you do since it's required. I think that's a ridiculous perspective, in my opinion.
I think that's
what you're
misrepresenting the study, to be honest with you. We're not saying that. And if that's a big issue with the commissioners, only look at new roads. I mean, it seems like it's pretty simple to resolve whether new development should be responsible for non-capacity issues relative to widening. Look at the new roads. If you only look at the new roads and you extract obviously the outliers, you're going to have a 2 to 2.1 million per lane mile construction cost estimate, including right away. You know, it's in the details, you know, and this is a common practice, and I think as Clancy indicated before, Orange County does it. In fact, Orange County simply divides the cost of a widening project in half. That's what the new lane should cost. Okay? Other counties don't. Other counties do exactly what's being proposed here, and this is a mechanism. This is a mechanism that's used today, unfortunately, to maximize impact fee revenues. And then that's not the purpose. The purpose of impact fees is to cover the cost of improvements needed by new development.
I think you misrepresent one thing. The other counties that do that don't use their optional sales tax to add the additional capacity like we do. They use it for those other improvements, and I think we're going to look at that. If we use our optional gas tax and our optional sales tax, and we blend it in the project, we'll be glad. But I'll tell you, it'll increase its impact fee. Well, they don't include that revenue source.
Include taxes, because everyone pays gas taxes. Okay, the issue is not gas taxes. We all pay those. They should be included, and even though we're taking the state part out, which really minimizes your gas tax revenue credit. The issue is cost. Okay, come up with a cost that you can live with, and then do your credits. Because a credit is based on, like was indicated, all non-impact fee revenue sources. That's what it is. Okay, it's black and white.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Oh, please, if you don't mind.
Well, I want to hear what Terry has to say.
Well, I know, but I would like to hear from Jason, please, if you don't mind.
On the gas tax issue, we as a policy use our gas tax, our local option gas tax, for capacity increasing projects. A lot of places use that money for roadway maintenance. We could fund our road and bridge crews like a lot of counties and like all the cities in this county do, and use that money for maintenance and the operation of our roads. We use it for capacity increasing projects in recognition of this lane mile cost. And I think from a common sense standpoint, if you're looking at the cost of the existing lane miles and the cost of the expansion, how do you separate that out? Let's look at County Road 512 Phase 3 widening that was just completed. We spent roughly $15 million on that project. How much would we have spent on that road this year if we didn't widen it? Nothing. Maybe there would be a resurfacing in there. Maybe we should reduce the cost by the resurfacing cost of a lane mile. But it's ridiculous to say that we should reduce the cost by 38%. I couldn't disagree with that more. The total reason for the cost, the only reason you need to acquire right-of-way is to widen the road. If we weren't widening the road, we wouldn't acquire right-of-way. You have the MOTs, which when you do a widening, you've got the existing 2 lanes, but then you've got to move traffic from those. You've got to build those temporary roads, build the 2 lanes here, build the temporary roads over there, move them back to the other 2 lanes. As happens, all that stuff is necessary only because of the expansion.
We're going to hear Mr. Wheeler. Do you have anything?
I think Jason just said everything I was going to argue.
Okay. We're going to let you ask every question you want to, Mr. Davis.
Whenever you let me, I understand.
No. But we want to hear everybody.
I'm not.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Jason, got a quick question for you. So, all right, taking any growth out of it whatsoever, in 2004, whenever on 512, we had issues on that road that needed to be taken care of whether a new resident moved to this community or not. And I'll just give you as an example, and it might be a freak example because it's what we went through, but I remember the traffic jams whenever we had that as a distribution center for ICE right there at the North County facility, and we could not get people back and forth because of the congestion whenever they were trying to turn into the North County facility. Now, based on and that's without any growth whatsoever, and that is an extreme scenario, I do understand. But what I'm really getting at in that is that if we had an accident there, if we had something go wrong there, so we couldn't get the emergency crews from one side of the Sebastian River to the other. So I don't want to say that I totally agree with Mr. Sorensen, but I don't know, and I want to hear, do we factor anything in for the existing structure that's there at all, or is it a zero?
Well, let me tell you what we do. We use most counties, and I think Mr. Sorensen has brought up a very good thing. We maybe shouldn't. Most counties use their optional gas tax for paying the road and bridge crews, paying resurfacing. We don't. And I think he's got a good point. We should use it to do those roads and take it out of the equation and go from there, because I think his impact fee will go up. The other thing, he says that we shouldn't have utility relocation costs affiliated with the expense of the road included in the cost. I think that's it's just bizarre to me.
I'm not saying that. Once again, I'm not saying do not do these improvements.
Can I read out of your study?
I'm saying do not pass 100% of these improvements on to new development. Now, this is a misrepresentation that occurs every single time I address a commissioner. They're saying, well, it's all or none. It's not all or none. Do the improvements. I'm not saying don't do them. I'm saying don't pass every penny of that cost on to new development, because it's not proportionate. It's not fair.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, just to dovetail on what Wesley said. I keep hearing over and over and over again MPO, and I don't know if it is in the county, but 13 years from concept to concrete. So Wesley would be right if we hadn't had any growth in the last 13 years before we improved 512. But the fact of the matter is we're improving the roads after the growth and after the congestion was created, unless I misunderstood what you were saying. So, if we hadn't had any growth in the last 13 years from concept to concrete, we may just have to resurface those roads and not build anything.
Yes, but that's kind of my point, is that we had the growth up to that, have paid impact fees and all that kind of stuff, and has used that 2-lane road. And that's where I'm trying to ask the question, is our figure a zero for the existing road whenever we use 512 as an example? Do we give a zero credit to the existing structure that's there?
We use, in that project, I don't know the exact amount, but in that project we had gas taxes and we had 1 cent sales tax that went into that $15 million project. Mm-hmm. If we were to do what Mr. Sorensen's suggesting, we've got $39 million in here over the next 5 years between gas tax and 1 cent sales tax for capacity increasing projects. That's built into the credit. If we took that away, we would have to take those gas tax and 1 cent sales tax dollars and apply them to the existing lanes. So the total revenue credit, there would be no revenue credit for roads.
Jason,
because we'd have to take every single penny of gas tax, or else we just wouldn't have the money. We wouldn't have the money to rebuild those existing lanes if we decided they were 25% or whatever the cost was.
I don't doubt that we can sit here and justify any tax that we want to impose. I'm not doubting that. What I'm trying to do is to get to the point where I can defend logically a position as far as where we are with our impact fees whenever somebody asks me the question. I'm not saying that, I'm not disputing that perhaps it would be a good idea to use our 1 cent option. I'm not saying that eventually I think we'll run out of money on it. I don't want us to defend our taxes. That's not what I'm trying to do is go to the logic of it, and I do believe somehow there should be some credit for the existing road there, and I want to know if we factor that into our equation or not.
We factor in because we take and use gas tax. What I'm saying is we're using another revenue stream because we know that we're using gas tax, which we wouldn't have to. We could say we're going to purely use impact fee money. When we do a road project, a major one, we always factor in our optional gas tax, and we factor in our optional sales tax and impact fees. And by doing that, you're not having the whole burden of that road fall on the impact fees because you're using other revenue streams.
But we don't factor in a percentage for the existing.
I can't think of a single road expansion project that this county has done in my 11 years here where we didn't have to use gas tax and sales tax to come up with all the money. I can't think of a whole project that was funded completely by impact fees. I don't think there has been one.
The question.
I think the issue should be, the question is, do you reduce the cost?
And we did.
Credit is not an issue.
That is no.
Gas taxes don't only go for widening. Gas taxes go for new roads. Gas taxes are there because new development pays gas taxes for both new roads and widening. It's not there because the cost of a widening is greater than the cost of a new road. The attempt to confuse.
Jason answered my question whenever he said no.
Okay, good.
Okay, you get it. You get it now?
Well,
Yeah, I
just
do. Thank you.
a couple of comments, when we get into the philosophy of this. You know, one of the reasons, you know, if we were sitting here as a corporation and looking this, and we had to report to our board of directors, these impact fees would be much higher because they don't cover the cost. In fact, the last numbers I heard, about 47% of the cost of new roads and stuff come from impact fees. The rest come from gas tax and sales tax. We spent $153 million in capital improvements last year. 47%, I believe, the numbers I've had from one of these meetings, came from impact fees. And it's the political pressure by having public meetings, which we do, and I agree with, by the way, but the bottom line is we try to set up here as elected officials and work out some kind of a compromise rather than just like the oil companies saying, you know what, price of oil went up, we're raising prices, you don't like it, don't buy the oil, don't buy the gasoline. But one of the problems we have with impact fees is the fact that sales tax is down, gas tax is down, building costs are down. I mean, a lot of houses are going on the market now for $100,000 less than they were 2 years ago. And the impact fees need to go up because it's the residential development that creates the stress on the current system that has to be protected or has to be maintained, it has to be built, the capital improvements. And then when we come up with all these numbers, we still give a 15% discount just in case we're bad, we made a mistake. And when you're looking at a $100,000, say, reduction in a $350,000 house, and an increase of maybe $5,000 in an impact fee, you know, there's still a net gain there as far as the consumer goes of $95,000 because of what's happened with the bubble that burst. But the bottom line is, as far as I'm concerned, you know, we've got to build the infrastructure, or we're going to set up here, or future commissioners are going to set up here and get hammered for not keeping up with what we needed to do and making good business decisions. The biggest problem I have with the impact fees, and I mentioned this before, is the trip generation attributed to commercial development. Small businesses are the backbone of this country, let alone our community. And when I look at some of the prices to build a small business for impact fees and the trip generation, because in my mind, if we weren't building residential homes, we wouldn't need businesses to provide those services. And there's got to be, because they're here to provide a service to the community and the citizens, just as this government's here to provide a service to them. And that's where I get undecided and confused about how we develop the trips. I agree with the impact on residential units. I absolutely agree with it. I think it's necessary, and I think probably this isn't going to be popular, but they're probably not high enough. But I just wonder where commercial comes in and how we can do something to stimulate the economy by businesses coming in.
And, you know, I think you're correct to a large degree. The recent trend in development, whereas more communities are becoming more and more dense, obviously lends itself to more walkability, less trips, shorter distances, less travel, less length, and as a result, you know, less impact on the road systems. There's no question about it. You know, the IT manual is relied on, obviously, for a lot of this information relative to trip rates, and I think he's actually made an adjustment for rates as well. There may be an argument that on the commercial side, the reduction or the adjustment could be more significant.
Okay, at this point, I see an audience here. If there's no objections, we'll open it up for the audience participation.
I don't object, but I would like to say something about the Commissioner Wheeler's talked about how it's, you know, it's only paying for 47% of it, and everything that you said, quite frankly, I agree with a lot of it. But where
Tell me where you disagree.
I will.
Okay.
I will. Is where you talk about, you know, how it's only paying 47%. Well, it's paying only 47% of, you know, perhaps what's a $4 million lane mile. I think that's double what it should be. Whenever you look at the practicality of what we're paying in State Road 60, for example. And if you bring that back in line, then that 47% jumps back up whenever you, and that goes back to the methodology and how we come up with it. It's not the concept of the impact fees that gives me heartburn, because I can't, growth as best it can should pay its way. But I can't defend a $4 million lane cost whenever somebody asks me a question, why does it cost so much? And that gives me heartburn, just like the commercial trips do you.
Well, I'm gonna agree with you, because outside. In fact, the two primary questions I had coming in here when I opened the meeting was,
You didn't open the meeting, please.
well, when the meeting opened, I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
You're forgiven.
Is the fact, are the costs we're attributing to these trips accurate?
Right.
And how do we attribute trips to commercial? And I've been through this. I just can't get it. Like I asked the question before. I live a mile from Publix, so I go to Sam's, I drive across the street, and after I leave Sam's and go to lunch or go to Home Depot, and then I come back across the street to, in fact, Tuesdays or whatever it is over there, then to Home Depot, and then back to Publix, and then home, and it's like 6, 7, 8 trips. Yeah. And you know, and I'm going across the street. And all of these businesses are here to provide a service for me so I can live here. But I agree, and I'd like to know, that's the question also, if I asked Joe, when $4 million lane mile, that includes everything. So what portion of the construction into that, for instance, using the state highway as an example, came in at half of what we expected it to be. So and as an example, I know we're not, but as an example, what portion of that construction cost that came down would equate to the $4 million lane mile? In other words, would it drop it to $3.5 million, or, you know, I don't know.
And did we take into account the additional 4 lanes that are already there? And if we did, how much was it?
Well, first of all, I keep saying what other counties do, and I'm going to do it because of what Builders Association does. It's going to reduce your ad valorem taxes significantly, but it's going to increase their impact fees. They hired a guy to do the study. We'll do what he wants.
And facetious.
No, I'm saying it. It's just ridiculous what he says in there. But what we do, and Jason, you're going to have to answer what we do with the lane costs, you know, as how we come up with it. Now, that's a moving target. A few years ago, you saw that when we had our existing impact fee, when prices were escalating, we weren't covering our road costs. We're all coming in way over our budget, and we weren't covering them. That's a moving target. Today, prices are down. Tomorrow, because of fuel and asphalt, they could go up in the next 6 months. We use our historical data, and a lot of it is the cost of right-of-way, the cost of what our prior roads were. We've got to draw a line and use defined data, and that's what we do. And we do include stormwater. It's required, but I don't know why we shouldn't include it. We did include landscaping of the medians. We do include curb and guttering. We do include all those things. And utility and relocating utilities for the expansion. We include those things. Street lighting, if it's required on that arterial, we include that cost. So we feel that's right. And I'll let Jason answer the cost, because the $4 million number being thrown around, I think Jason can answer that.
One other question, Jason, to throw into that mix. I mean, some of the properties that we've just bought, I mean, it might be $1.5 million lane mile or more just for the right-of-way we're buying. I mean, and none of that, but we're paying 20 and 30% above appraisal.
And let me make a couple points on that before Jason goes. When we try to calculate cost per lane mile, what we're doing is really trying to average over all the projects we have on our 25-year long-range transportation plan, cost feasible plan. We're trying to get an average. Take a look at 26th Street from 43rd to 58. We figure we're probably going to have to take 8 houses we're going to have to buy. Right-of-way acquisition for that segment is going to be, you know, through the roof. It's significant there. And that's why in some other roads we have to replace a number of bridges doing it, or when engineering has to increase the elevation of the road, and that affects bridges. It's not that every road is exactly alike in terms of right-of-way and construction.
Right, but we're talking replacement of bridges, and then we're talking new bridges, replacement of things. Language is sort of thrown in the mix here, and we need to clarify, because all we want to do here, I think, is to be fair and consistent with everyone. And it's hard to get a handle on all this from the lingo.
And Madam Chair, a good example, let's just take bridges that we're going to be replacing along 66th Avenue. I mean, let's not sit here and kid ourselves and say that if nobody moved in, that those bridges would be fine forever. I mean, they're on wood pilings. They're right there. You got to wait until the cars move out to where you can pull on and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, well, maybe it is just the vehicle I drive. But looking on the flip side of what you're talking about, yes, I understand what you're saying, but there's also some things on the other side, and that's really what we've got to try to balance, just like Commissioner Bowden said, is I've got to be able to explain it to those on both sides of the issue about why we made this decision and how we came up with it, and I can't do that yet.
We're going to keep you after school. So
I thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I just, and Commissioner Davis, I'll be glad to pass this down to you, but the Budget Office made up a summary of about 6 either completed, current, or future road projects and broke it down by funding category. And I'll be glad to pass this down. But impact fees on average, now it's kind of all over because some of the projects got grants and there's some developer contributions, gas tax, optional sales tax. So the percent varies on each one, but if you average all these projects, impact fees are paying 49.8% of the total cost. So I think, as Joe was trying to say, is we are using other revenue sources for that existing level of service and replacing the bridges on 66th Avenue. That's already factored in here because impact fees are only paying for 50% of those project costs. And I think the point is, if we try to break it down and say, okay, what is the true cost for the extra lanes, that's probably going to be a higher percentage. That'll probably be 75%. So we're already coming in lower at 50% than if we really factored in just true expansion costs.
And so they derive those numbers by taking a lane mile of what it cost or what.
This is just the total project cost.
And that is, does that like State Road 60 in there with you throwing 66th Avenue bridges in
State
there?
Road 60 is not in that one.
Okay, but State Road 60 is.
What? No.
No, it's not in this table here, but
66th Avenue bridges?
512 is, Phase 3 and 4. The Oslo Road widening we did a few years back.
Okay.
So
they're
current
only projects that
Oslo
have been
widening
completed?
project.
For Route 60, we're not paying for it. We're giving a loan, and we haven't completed it. So that's a future project. Let's not get that confused. If they want us to put it in the impact fees, if there's an over, we can't because we're getting it. They're paying for it. It would be if we did put it in the calculation, it'd be cost of the road, what the state paid for it. I don't know why everyone keeps bringing up Route 60 because it's being paid for the state. We're giving a loan. And maybe we shouldn't do that.
No,
I won't do it in the future.
I'm sorry. Let me make myself clear, if I could, about why I bring up State Road 60. It's more of the lane cost mile that, Mr. Baird?
Yes.
It's more of the lane cost mile. And I'm sorry, I hope you see the significance of the lane cost mile and the reason why I bring it up, not to necessarily in the impact fee as far as anything, the funding mechanism or anything like that.
Do we have the cost of Route 60?
The cost on that segment of State Road 60 is 4 additional lane miles. $18 million divided by 4 lane miles is $4.5 million a lane mile. That's construction only, not engineering and design. There were no right-of-way issues with that, so there are no right-of-way costs built into that project. So that's $4.5 million on that project per lane.
Now, what is our average? Because we keep picking that, and then we use that, and then we average it. We take all the road lane miles, because there's been some misleading information, I think, given to some commissioners, and we take an average of that. Now, the 4-lane mile did come in at 17-something.
About 18 million, yeah.
Construction. So I don't know that. And I don't know if it's construction engineering, so it's not as far off as what we had in the study. So, and you know what, if you say, what is our cost of road lane mile on other roads, what was our average cost? See, I think you need to look at our average cost. Is what we tried to do. And what I think the concern here is, I think they think that by throwing the state road lane miles in, it skews it on an average, and I think that's a concern as a cost. And we could look at that, but we tried to average it all in. What's the average cost?
The average cost per lane mile of all the roads, including state roads, is $3.9 million, a little under $4 million. The county roads have about 3.7 million per lane mile, city projects 4.4 million, and the state projects 4.7 million.
So in other words, it doesn't matter where your project is. It's the averaging of all the projects and location, location, location. If you're in a great spot and it doesn't cost as much and you're paying for the spot down the road that does cost more. So it's the average. Have I got this right? Okay, you get that? Okay. Well, let's open it up to the public at this point. And I see your number one already standing there. Name and address for the record, please.
Chuck Meckling, 1999 Point West Drive. Last night I was tuning in on the P&Z meeting, and I was inspired by Mr. Keating's concept of objective and a master vision to get to that point in his discussion. And I feel that what we're discussing today is an example of something that doesn't have those components. I don't have a good feel for what Duncan's done. I know that figures and information was given to them, and we have a lot of assumptions, and just by the discussion amongst the commissioners today, I think that it warrants the fact that we need to take a step back and get real numbers and real information into this. Joe, if you're saying the impact fees need to go up, I think we that are in this industry that helps build our community, I've been blessed to be involved with Cypress Lake, Stonebridge, Arbor Trace. I can go down the line. These are communities that staff uses as examples of what to do right in our community. And then it gives us the ability to grow gracefully as a community. When we had the State Road 60 issue, as a community, we came together and came up with a concept in working with the state of Florida to come with a program to get that road expanded. There was lots of anxiety over the initial big number cost of doing State Road 60, which today was not a necessity to go through that because reality is become a much smaller number. We have the cost of building state roads factored in to this new impact fee. Do we have a written statement from the Department of Transportation saying that they will no longer obligate to taking care of state roads in any way, shape, or form? Because when I called Tallahassee and asked that question, because I wanted them to send it to me in writing, that they would no longer meet their obligation, that I as a taxpayer feel that they should, they said, where did I get that information? Because that is not their policy. Is it going to be a future policy? I don't know. But what I know is that one of the things that I have felt about Indian River County is when there's an issue, we come together, we hash it out, we come up with a program, and we move ahead. State Road 60 is going to get built. County's been benevolent enough to front the money. It comes back. A program's been done. Industry's picking up its share of the lost interest carry. It came together and we moved forward. I don't see the need to have the state road costs factored into these roads, or at least we should step back, because I don't think anybody felt that now was the time to start these impact fees. And if we take a real look at where the numbers are, and I'll give you a for instance, we'll switch to the school. Bob, when the school numbers were given to Duncan and Associates, did the people that came in and did the mass buying of concurrency, which would give us a 0.4 students to per house, factored into the numbers that were given to Duncan?
Wait, the 0.4 students per house wasn't based on people buying concurrency. That was based on a GIS, Geographic Information System analysis, using the school district's Edgelog system, which showed every single student at every single house. I mean, that was a derived number, exactly what's there. It didn't have anything to do with prepaying impact fees to buy concurrency.
But when you give people numbers, concurrency that has been bought up would be lumped into those numbers, because to my understanding, if a builder came in and bought 1,000 units of concurrency, that they would, that trip is on the road and that student in concept would be in that classroom?
Yeah, we are reserving a space for the student, correct, and we are reserving capacity for a trip. but it's not factored in the impact fees.
But it's factored into the numbers that were given to Duncan. That would be a yes? Because if it's reserved, it would be in those numbers. And the point I want to make to that is, we got to ask ourselves, what growth rate are we really going at in this county? And I think that if we do not accept the report today, we do step back for a moment, we do take the time to come up with what would be realistic numbers, that would serve our community best. And that with that, we could resolve this issue, because there's nobody that feels that they should pay their fair share. That's not ever been the issue. Just like the argument with State Road 60 also often was, and from industry's point of view, we couldn't believe these numbers that were coming in to build that road. And after all of that grief and time with commission staff, everybody, we see what the number comes in at. I just think that we have an ability to take some time to work this thing out so that we as a community can move forward with grace and planning so that we can meet our future needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
May I ask Bob a question?
Yes, Bob Keating.
Does the 3.9 million factor in the state roads?
Yes, it does. And as long as you gave me
Get
this,
an average, or
as Jason indicated, we've got a number for state, county, and city roads, and the 3.9 is an average.
Of all
when
three?
you look at a road, you're not looking at necessarily what the state road's costing us. You're looking at overall. I want to make sure I understand. Overall in the county, you're looking at this and this and this: state roads, county roads, streets, everything, and then average them to try and get a fair price for what construction is going to cost on a road, whether it's a state road or not a state road. Is that's? I'll make sure that's clear.
That's correct.
So you're only using that to get your average.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what's been the confusion.
Yeah.
Now,
Right.
we could ask the consultant, I think, because, I mean, that's been a kind of a thorn in the law of the people's side, is that could we not use this, I guess one, I don't know if it can be a policy decision by the board not to use the cost of the state roads in the equation. Once again, I will say when Route 60 numbers came out from the state, our staff thought they were way high too, but we try not to criticize other jurisdictions, and we thought they were high. But I think the consultant can answer, can we take state roads as a policy decision, because that's been one of the sore spots on this whole calculation.
And would it make a big difference?
Well, you certainly can take them out.
I don't think it would.
You know, it's in terms of practice in Florida. Some communities include state road costs, some don't, to come up with an average cost. If you took the state road projects out, the fees would go down like 9%. So it's not a huge difference, but it would make some difference.
Let me just add a couple of things to this. State road construction costs, this issue is not real simple. If you take costs out, Mr. Sorensen also said you should take the trip length out, which is a completely different ballgame and would significantly reduce the fees. Basically, you would be reducing the average trip length, because you would not be assessing a fee for any portion of a trip that was on State Road 60, US 1, A1A, or 510 over the Wabasso Causeway. Now, let me tell you why state road costs and the travel on state roads should be factored in. First of all, the county is spending money on state roads and doing projects. We're building one lane in one direction. Actually, the city is for us on A1A from the 17th Street to Seagull. We're building a capacity improvement there. We're doing other capacity improvements by three-laning parts of A1A. We're doing the same thing with parts of County Road 510. Another thing is the state is doing projects on local roads, on county roads, which will come in at state construction costs. They're building a capacity producing improvement on 16th, 17th Street west of US 1. They're going to be building 82nd Avenue from its current terminus, about 33rd Street, up to County Road 510. Those will be done based on state construction costs, because the state is doing that because we're using federal funds to do it. What ICE-T and T21 and now Safe-T-Lou do is it gives more flexibility in spending federal funds, and we can use some funds on local roads like we are at 82nd and 16th, 17th Street. The other thing is we're not going to get many more state roads built in this county with state money. It's just not going to be there. We will be if we have to 6-lane portions of US 1, we will be doing it using county dollars. These are all reasons why state road construction costs and travel on state roads needs to be figured in.
Okay.
Madam Chair, a question of Bob. And
Yes, and that'll be it, because we'll want to take our captioning break.
Right. Bob, but we would get reimbursed. For example, are we not getting any reimbursement at all from the state for doing that work on A1A?
No.
None whatsoever. So unlike State Road 60 that we're getting reimbursed from.
Right. To get reimbursed, it needs to be on the 5-year work program, DOT's 5-year work program, which means it has to be prioritized by the MPO. Then it has to go through all the phases of state construction. It has to go through project development and environmental, which is PD&E, and then design, then right-of-way, and then construction. And every one of these at the state level are more time-consuming, expensive, and the money is not there to do it now. The 13 years from concept to concrete is based on the assumption that when one phase ends, the money's there to do the next phase. When you finish PD&E, there's money there to do design. That is not happening.
And if we call the secretary of, or the regional, what is it, Mr. Wolf, I believe it is?
Yes.
And we call him and ask him that question, are y'all going to build any more roads in Indian River County? What would he say?
Well, I've talked to him about money. He's told me basically, Joe, don't ask for anything, we're short. If they had their way, they would be pulling Route 60 off right now. They'd be pushing it back. They're pushing all their road projects back because, like everyone else, all our revenues are a lot slower coming in. They've been reduced considerably. He told me in fact, we had a very hard time keeping Route 60 on the table, and he was very cooperative. He wanted to push it back. They're having to, their roads, they've already, roads that are supposed to be done in the next 4 years, they're going to do them in 7. So that's how bad their revenue stream is, and it's nothing that's their fault. Their revenue stream is that bad. I've had several conversations with him.
But is it safe to assume that it's an oversimplification if we just say they're not going to build any more roads?
No, let me just tell you, I know you know that the payback for State Road 60 wasn't finalized till 2016. That was to give us a little more money to construct roads that have already gone through the first 3 phases of the process, like US 1, the 6-laning of US 1 from the next segment, which is around the Oslo Road area. We can program some of that basically with the projects we've got out there that have gone through PD&E, that have gone through design. That would use our money for the next 15 years or so. Like I said, we've got 2 or 3 more segments on US 1. 82nd Avenue has gone through PD&E and is almost done with design. 16th, 17th Street's gone through PD&E, design, right-of-way, and it's ready for construction. All of these, there's not enough money in the next 15 years or so to do those roads, let alone any would-be programming like US 1, like US 1 North.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break, please, for captioning.
came from the DOT with a really straight plan. Y'all look at the guys that have the plan. Some guys are saying little cherry pick the lowest price road project we've ever done. And also remember,
How much are the tickets? Oh, yeah. Because I have a good feeling about this.
never about the consumption. That's they come in at 17 million just right. Or is that more the real number? I agree, but but the 17 million, that dividend, that goes up to $4.5 million later. Right away, the bank state right, but if not correct, then instead of 4.4. Well, I don't know, that's just good. 5 gauge, that's the city of that's the average. raise anything today, then we should have some kind of plan in place with a real starting point, which gives us time to adjust things. I'm not talking big increments. Keep something in place as we move forward. You know, how does an oil field pork price run out of water? So you can't just sit here and keep, because then you guys will come back to the number. Everyone's going to argue about what the real prices are high, now they're low. What if it's jump up? What number is that? All the time.
Okay, if we can please come back to order. Thank you. If we can please come back to order so we can. Okay. Thank you.
I think they like that.
Thank you very much. And we do have someone, I believe, at the podium next who would like to speak. Yes. Good morning. If you would please
The mic's on.
put the mic on green.
Tap switch.
Am I on? I'm on. Okay. My name is Maria Fulchini, and I reside at 1206 Fifth Place, Vero Beach. I am the president of the Realtors Association of Indian River County, and I am here today speaking on behalf of over 1,000 realtors to convey our position on the proposed impact fees. No one needs to be reminded of the sluggish state of the economy. The concern is so great, the federal government has taken several steps recently in attempts to kickstart the real estate industry. Their hope and intent is that stimulating the real estate industry will also stimulate the economy and drive it, as it has over the last several years. The proposal to increase impact fees thwarts that intent. It is a disincentive for area builders. It aggravates the existing concern and the need for affordable housing, and it lengthens the market's recovery time by adding additional fees to the consumer. Impact fee studies have found the following. The higher costs for new construction in turn results in upward pressure on the cost of existing properties and thus the value as well. It increases urban sprawl as developers seek political jurisdictions without impact fees in which to build. And it creates disproportionate disadvantages to lower-income households. Let's not forget the true intent and collection of impact fees should be directed toward financing capital improvements related to a specific new development, not to finance the maintenance of existing infrastructure. Several counties have recently either enacted a freeze on impact fees, rolled back the rates, or have agreed to waive them temporarily, and it seems to be the prudent action to take during this housing market slump. Homeownership is the cornerstone of the American dream, and increasing impact fees diminishes this dream. The Realtors Association cannot and does not support the proposed increases of impact fees, as it will only hinder the recovery of the real estate market and the overall economy of this area. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Name and address, please, for the record.
My name is John Williams. I live at 1535 Smuggler's Cove, and I'm here to urge you very much to heed Joe Baird's comments and the comments of your fine community development planner, Bob Keating, and of Jason. They seem to have a better handle on it than the consultants on either side, or frankly, they expressed their handle on it better than I heard done. There was quite a bit of gobbledygook expressed, but it comes down, frankly, to a pretty plain issue, and that issue, again, is fairness. I bought 5 years ago over at Smuggler's Cove I bought an existing house. I didn't add to the impact of residents in this county. I don't need to have 66th Avenue made into 4 lanes. Everybody that lived here 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, did not need to have 66th Avenue made into 4 lanes. But we're paying for it, and we're paying at least 50% of it, if your impact fee statistics are at all correct. That is not fair. And that obviously is the entire thrust behind the legitimacy of impact fees. I stood in front of this commission, I think 4 years ago at least, and complained about the fact that I discovered that our 1%, our 7th cent, our 1% optional sales tax was being used for road improvements. And I made the point then that why in the world would that 1%, and I made the contention that if that 1%, if that description of its future use would have been on the ballot question, then we wouldn't, I suspect, would not have voted for it. We all understood at the time this was to improve our current existence. It was to improve the infrastructure. It was to improve the existing infrastructure, not to expand it. When I made that contention about it being used to help the developers, which it was, Mrs. Ginn claimed, oh no, we're not using any of that 1% for road or bridge construction. And after I proved it, she, of course, understood later that it indeed was. I think that what was brought out here this morning and what Mr. Baird focused on is the unfairness of that, which I spoke to 4 years ago. It is not a proper use for our 7th cent. And I certainly would like to see it taken out of the calculations, the credit calculations, in calculating a proposed transportation impact fee. Same with our gas tax money. That's supposed to improve our existing roads, not to provide roads for developers. So in that view, why don't you do what the rest of the counties apparently are doing and omit those funds and fees from your calculation and let them really look maybe perhaps at a more realistic impact fee for transportation. It's conceivable that in a year or 2 years, with gas continuing to go up, well, we know who can thank for that over the last 25 years, the Democrats failing to allow any drilling in the commodity market, making great speculation on those rotten decisions. But anyway, but we know that the gas, we fear, and it may be true that the gas will continue to increase. If it does, if it gets beyond $4 and if it gets to $5, I am saying to you that there will be a dramatic decrease in trips per day. People will simply not be able to have the freedom to do what they might otherwise, in a sense, almost frivolously do with their automobile. And therefore, you can, if you wish, revisit this superficially at least, without a full-fledged review and a full-fledged cost. When you perhaps, if you see that in reduced gas consumption, et cetera, if you see that result, you can revisit it in a year or two and perhaps recalculate part of the transportation fee based upon a reduced trips. You're also going to be having reduced fees, has been acknowledged, because if gas continues to go up, the sales of the gas tax monies will decrease. But at least for now, look at this and impose this. One thing that I don't think has entered the calculations at all in your minds this morning is the fact that along with this downturn, we have a heck of an inventory of existing homes that need to be sold. And new homes, I might add, the realtors will confirm this, are still selling higher, more than, I don't mean in cost necessarily, but I mean in number of sales than the existing homes, which would not require any impact fees for people to buy. I live on Smuggler's Cove. There were 36 homes. A short while ago, 4 of them out of the 36 were for sale, and they'd been for sale for some time. I think 2 have sold. One of them is a foreclosure. Those homes can all be purchased and taken off the market without a single dollar being paid to the county for impact fees. And I think that by being realistic and being fair and imposing what the consultants have told you to impose and what your county administrator understands should be imposed would not only make fairness an issue again, bring fairness to the level table, it would help sell your existing inventory. And I would urge you to consider that. But most of all, why don't you consider taking out the optional sales tax from these calculations and my gas tax too? We would never have passed it. We would never have voted for it if we knew it was going to be used to help make this county more crowded and less pleasant. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Penny Chandler. I live at 1408 Club Drive. While I have been, over the past year, I think this is now the 5th or 6th meeting I've attended and participated in regard to impact fees, and while I helped facilitate an impact fee task force, and I've spoken to you before about that, I'm not here on behalf of my employer, and I'm not here on behalf of that impact fee task force today. In fact, I think this is the first time I've ever come before you as a resident. But I have learned a lot over the past year about the study and about the impact fee process and so on. Today there was early on a mention of the calculation of trips to a strip center. I think it was Wesley or Gary who asked that question. The answer that you received was in regard to a mall. I think that was very unfortunate. I think it's misleading. And there were other things that were brought up this morning where the consultant wasn't aware of some of the school issues. There's been the whole discussion about gas taxes, the state road issue, more school issues. And I guess my biggest concern as a resident and somebody who has learned a great deal about the impact fee process over the past year or so is, my big concern is in accepting a study that could possibly sit on the shelf that will pull off in 18 to 24 months and dust it off and put it into use. The information and data that was collected, much of it is from 2006. The first report was given in 2007. And based on the factors that are in that report, I don't know how we can feel comfortable when at workshop after meeting, we have heard people say to the consultant, could certain factors be changed or removed from this report? And at every turn, they've agreed that they could remove or change those factors. Well, if this report, if this study is a continuing moving target, how do you feel comfortable about using it, dusting it off in 18 to 24 months and using it again? I'm not sure that I, as a resident, and a voter, would want to see that happen. Some of the things that were used in creating the costs and determining how much things would be, whether that be a building, whether that be a road, park, whatever it was, were based on material costs and labor costs of a couple years ago. And those costs aren't any good now either. And they certainly aren't going to be any good in 18 to 24 months. As we watch, I don't know how I missed gas at $3.78, but I did, and yesterday I paid $3.85. And, these costs are going up every single day. And when those costs go up, so do the costs of those construction materials and those road materials. I just don't understand how we can say then that in a couple of years we're going to bring this thing out, dust it off, and it's going to be okay. We've changed so much in that already. I just don't think that it's going to be a good benchmark down the road. And I would encourage you not to accept it and learn that we all have used this as a good learning curve for something that's to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name's Peter Robinson. I live at 315 Great Twig Road, Vero Beach, Florida. There were a couple of issues that you raised when they had some questions, so I wanted to give you, a couple just answers for those. One of the things you talked about with the schools, the bond issue and the COPs and things like that, and they pointed out that, the new taxpayer pays for that along with the old taxpayer. The only point I would like to make, which I never see a credit for, is the new taxpayer pays more than the old taxpayer. So he's paying more forever, based on the Save Our Homes. And and there's no credit in there for him getting to pay more. It's just stick it to him, because that's our slogan around here. The other thing that you asked was...
Wait, Peter, on that issue, that's a fixed cost. Okay, whatever that debt service is, it's a fixed cost. And if the overall tax base goes up, then to generate that same dollar cost will lower the millage rate. So everybody's still going to be paying the same, doesn't matter how new or old your house is.
That's true.
Okay, so it's a fixed cost.
No, but the new person is paying more tax than the old person because he's being assessed at a higher rate. You're being assessed at, we both have a $100,000 house. I just built my house last year, so I get assessed at $85,000. You have a $100,000 house, and you've lived there for 20 years. You're assessed at $50,000.
The assessment doesn't matter. Say it's $1 million a year is a debt service payment, and we have 500,000 houses in the community. Everybody's going to be paying $2. If you add 500,000 new houses, and we have 1 million houses,
I believe
everybody's only paying $1.
The COPs, that's in your 2 mills that's being paid for.
Yeah, but they don't assess the full 2 mills.
Yeah, but it's based on your assessment.
But it's still
a
dollar amount, Peter, divided by more houses. It goes down.
But I, as a new homeowner, am paying more than the old homeowner. And I'm not getting any credit for that.
Well, you as an old homeowner, because you've had the same house for a long time, are paying a lot less than the new homeowner. I think that's a better way to. And however, if there is growth, and you have more houses, I think what Commissioner Bryan
I understand
there's more value.
Yeah.
Your cost for debt service is going to go down.
Right.
And the majority of your Avalon tax for schools is not new construction. It's operating costs. You take off the debt service, and you take off the 2%, the 2% for capital, 2 mills. So you're about 6 mills of your 9 are for operating costs for schools, not the capital, which we're addressing. And let me say, if you've got a beef with the school having impact fees, please, I had a couple of the breaks say schools don't want them, then they need to vote and tell us they don't want them. We can't put it on this agenda or include their impact fee unless they want it. Everyone keeps telling me they don't want it. Well, you guys need to go visit them because we haven't gotten that vote.
Okay, we'll go visit them. But, my point is, if you're going to calculate it, there should be a different credit. That's all I'm saying. And he and I disagree, and I'm going to have to go get him some numbers and show him that I think I'm right. He'll give me some numbers, and we'll argue about it later. But anyway, the other issue that you raised was you had that ratio with Orange County and Volusia County, and you said, what are their road tax? And you do have here a sheet that says existing road impact fees, which was handed out later. But I did have my assistant go Google Volusia County and Orange County, and guess what? The number's different than the number you were given, so I thought I should at least give you the right number. According to Google, according to what their websites say today, Volusia County is $2173.88 for a single-family residence. They just have a single-family residence. They don't have a square foot. Orange County also has a single-family residence one, and today their impact fee is $3,605. On July 7th of 2008, which is coming up pretty quickly, it's going to raise to $3,713. So they are calculating for some inflation. And then on July 7th of 2009, it goes to $3,825. Now, one thing that has been mentioned, with Orange County, which I think everybody's aware of, is that they do give other credits up there. And one of the other things they do in Orange County as far as level of service goes is their attitude is if you've got two roads running parallel and one's E and the other's B and you have a level of service C, the traffic on E road will figure out in a little while to go over to the B road. And you'll end up with two C roads. And if you watch the way they did it, like I grew up there, you remember John Young Parkway. You go up to John Young Parkway today, it's a nice 6-lane road. You can get all around up there. I was on it yesterday. I remember I was a little beat up 2-lane road. And, what they've done is they've designed that along with several other roads to take the traffic off of other major arteries so people will use it. So I think, that's one of the biggest things I keep saying is we need to put traffic on other arteries, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The other issue was somebody talked about the fact that 26th and 33rd Street to 58th Avenue is going to be widened, and I know Mr. Williams felt that he didn't want his 1-cent sales tax to be used for roads. But, I live on the beach. When I get on 26th Street, which I get on all the time, that road is substandard. Whether you build another house, you've got to widen that road because, it's unsafe. And just as we said earlier about the bridges are unsafe. You need to build the bridges. I don't care whether we ever have another person in here. And then Joe says, well, I'll just take the 1-cent sales tax away from you. Well, I don't know what Carolyn Ginn said to Mr. Williams, but I do know what Joe Baird said when they were passing the 1-cent sales tax to the Treasure Coast Builders Association. He said, we're going to use that to build some roads. We're going to do things like that. Well, now we come up and object to his impact fees, and he says he's going to take it away from us. I don't think that's fair, Joe. I think you need to spend it on roads more than you need to spend it on these buildings here.
Well,
personally, that's the way I feel about it.
I think we agreed to pay around 27% of the sales tax. I told the builders would go to roads. You're saying have it go to new roads. I'm saying it could go to bridges that need to be replaced. That's bridges and roads. I'm not saying don't do it. I never said don't do it. I think you misunderstand that.
Well, that's the way you approached it when they got up.
And I got to say,
the 1-cent sales tax was vaporizing. It wasn't going to be used for that stuff.
And also, I think, and you said to stick it to the new guy. And we don't try and do that. We didn't develop the Avalon tax system. That was done by the state legislators in Amendment 1. And if you're referring to that, I don't think I want to or the commissioners want to stick it to anybody. That was developed by the state. Talk to them about that.
Well, we do talk to them regularly. And you're not the only people we complain to, Joe.
The bridges, I understand, they're being built with a sales tax,
right?
Not with impact fees.
But this is the question on the bridges, and to be honest with you, what most of the counties do, and my final point is this: most of the counties get their impact fee money and they spend it. And what they usually spend it on is, as an example, the bridges. Because the bridges need it, and usually what happens is you get a couple of new pieces of growth out there. An example would be out there where, on 41st, you got Abington Woods and you got the other one just down the road. Well, you collected all those impact fees. All those people are going on that bridge, which is totally substandard. They grab that money, they take it, and they build that bridge, and they give them a new bridge right away. It helps everybody, because people like me who drive out that way, what do? We always take 41st. I get a benefit from it, but they spend their impact fees and they get it spent, and you can tie it right to the new development too. A lot of them spend it on, the other thing they do is they spend it on, when you've got a road, the biggest problem you got with a road is the intersections. Okay? The quickest place to spend impact fees is in intersections. Go out there. Hey, we're helping to spend it.
If we spend $153 million, that's a lot of money to spend. And on top of that, you drive around this county, Peter, and we got construction going on every place in this county. In the last 4 years,
we have stepped up.
Or the last 6 years, this commission has stepped up to the plate and made roads and transportation a priority. And from the north end of the county to the south end of the county and east and west, we got construction going on roads. And all the bridges are being paid for by sales tax, not by impact fees.
But what I'm arguing is we need to spend we need to empty out the impact fee fund.
I think we're
and
doing
Joe
that.
keeps telling me he's going to do it, and I'm just saying get it emptied, because that will make it, we talk about this report being legally defensible. Well, the most legally defensible thing is that you spend all your impact fee money in 7 years, because if you don't, that's when somebody can come back after you to get that money
where
back.
are we on that?
I think I know you had some concerns, Mr. Robinson, a few years ago, because we had 120 million roughly in cash balance. We are down to, I think, around 60. I have boasted it with what projects I have out there between 512. With what I have, I will probably be down to 10 million. I know when I run out of money, there'll be people coming, what did you do? You wasted the money, now we're out of money and you got to borrow money. And I'm going to wait for that date, because that's how it goes.
Well, Joe,
we're going to be there.
Congratulations, you spent it.
And then we're going to have to borrow money and you're in a worse situation. Now I've got interest expense. And we'll get there.
Yeah.
And so I think, Jason, we're looking at in about 2 years, we look like we'll be down to what we call about 10 or 15 million, which we're going to try and keep between impact fees, gas tax, and the portion we attribute and the optional sales tax. But I will say, and you are correct, we do plan to we told the public we'd spend around 27% of our optional sales tax in roads and bridges, and we intend to live up to that and it's not my final decision, but the board. And that's what we did tell people. We plan to spend the optional sales.
Well, and I don't think anybody's going to argue,
It wasn't all in this building. I just wanted you to correct you there, too.
This $84 million building?
I'm just giving you my opinion of where you're better spending money, whether you're better spending on government buildings or roads. I vote for roads, personally. And I bet if you took most of the people, they'd say build roads, don't build government buildings.
I would like...
Now, I will, we stayed in that other building too long, and you know that.
I'm just telling you how it is.
I would like to point out, though, that...
he's for democracy where we vote on things. So I'm all for democracy if you want to put that one on the ballot.
Not on everything. That's the important thing. But I would like to point out that I don't think any member of this commission had anything to do with the cost of this building or raising it. Although it's a beautiful facility, but we didn't have anything to do with it.
Okay, well.
Joe did. It's all your fault.
Okay, and then the only other item I would bring up is that we always talk about, one of the things that came out of the impact fee report was let's come up with some smart ideas that can maybe spend this impact fee money and be a little different than the other theory. And one of the items that's always been a craw in my gut was I remember back when I did Laurelwood, and we didn't have impact fees back then. They didn't have any of this stuff. And one of the things that they did was they had traffic problems. And the way they solved the traffic problems was they did amazing things. They paved 4th Street. Gosh, that was a tough one. And then they went and paved 5th Street Southwest. I remember when they came up with that idea.
Who paid for it?
The county paid for it.
Where'd the money come from?
The county came out of taxes. All I'm saying is what's happened is all of a sudden we've gotten to 58th Avenue and we've got Route 60 and we got Oslo Road. You own a bunch of road right-of-way that already exists. Back when Fran Adams was on this board, the board voted to pave 8th Street.
Oh, my God.
8th Street isn't paved, but I can guarantee you if you would go out there now and pave 8th Street, you're going to see a big drop-off on Route 60 because you got all this growth that happened in South County, and it's never, gone through. And if there's ever going to be any cheap right-of-way for you to buy, that right-of-way is going to be cheaper than anything because it's outside the urban service district. So, I would just say, and the only other point I would make is this. The way this report was structured, so that they looked at everything they had, and then they said, this is what it's going to cost, and this is what you're going to buy. We have if you would come up with a 7-year program for impact fees, where you're going to spend the money in 7 years, and just list it, you can go figure out real fast how much those roads are going to cost to build, or how much the buildings are going to cost to build, and limit it to 7 years. I know he's got a 2000. They always talk about their 25-year or 30-year plan. Well, 25 and 30-year plans aren't 7-year plans. And that's what you need to look at because that's what the law is.
We have 5-year plans.
But make sure you spend it. So, Thank you.
We have
Thank
a
you very
5-year
much.
We have a 5-year plan for transportation improvements. It's $288 million that goes through 2011, 2012, and I don't know where we're going to get all the money from. We're going to be that's $288 million. That's in order to get there. We had to assume that we'd bond everything out in the 5th year. So we have a deficiency in dollars. We've used up a majority of a large portion of the current balance that we have. I'd also like to add something on the bridges. 66th Avenue is an example. There's some bridges that aren't in good shape there that need to be replaced anyway. We're not using impact fees to replace those.
As we should.
Between this year and next year, we've got $3.7 million for bridges over lateral A, 33rd Street, 37th Street, 41st, 45th. Also in the 1 cent sales tax, we've got millions more for 68th Avenue. We've got 16th Street Bridge over lateral A, 43rd Avenue Bridge over South Relief Canal, Old Dixie Highway Bridge over South Relief Canal, 82nd Avenue Bridge over 4th Street Canal, 5th Street Southwest Bridge over 43rd Avenue Canal, 41st Street Bridge at 66th Avenue Canal. We just completed 4th Street Bridge at 35th Avenue, 82nd Avenue Bridge at lateral D Canal. That's over the next 2 years. So we are using those existing revenue sources, the gas tax, the sales tax. This is sales tax alone.
You know, we should maybe put a portion of that in the impact fees if we used the consultant for the Builders Association, the portion applies to the additional lane we're putting in. I mean, that's, if you play that game, you got to play it both sides.
Okay, anyone else would like to speak to this issue, please?
Good morning. Don Wright, 720 North Fisher Circle, Sebastian. I participated on the Impact Fee Committee, and I've heard a lot of these discussions. And one of the things that I think we miss is going back and looking at what the impact fees are really for. We're talking capacity on roads, but again, you have to look at capacity based on new residents, not just capacity. How much of the roads, how much road work would be done in this county if nobody else moved here? And I would think, from what I'm hearing, that most of these projects are based on needs that the existing residents have, not based on new needs of new development. Certainly some of it is. I listened to the argument, oh yeah, well, you know, this is, let's get the money to pay, have new development pay for itself. Well, there's a number of factors in that. That new appraisal on the house goes into the ad valorem taxes. I tried to get some studies done at the tax appraiser's office, but you know, I know I pay about half the taxes for my neighbor who bought their house a number of years later than I do. So all of these new homes, everybody that lives there is paying significantly more in taxes, or the person who traded a home in ad valorem taxes, than the people who've been here for a long period of time. That all goes into the tax base. But I think that if you stopped for a minute and looked at the study, the consultant that did the study said it this morning, the study was based on calculating the maximum amount of impact fees you could possibly charge. I don't think anybody should be debating whether that's the right answer or not. It's not the right answer for Indian River County. If you looked at every project and said, you know, would we build this if we had a flat population for the next 10 years, or wouldn't we? I think a lot of the spending gets caught up in capacity needs that already exist as of today, and that should be carefully looked at. I'm surprised when I hear you say that portables are never going to be gotten rid of. You know, with the way the economy is going, and with what's going on with the demographics in Florida, you know, people moving out, some moving in, you know, if the school enrollment declines a few percentage points, there's a possibility that the portables will no longer be needed. And if we continue to increase the cost of living for people who are going to move here, there's a possibility that that's going to happen. It is important to have a stable economy. And what you're talking about with impact fees in my opinion, is a disincentive for economic growth in Sebastian, in Indian River County, Sebastian, Vero Beach, which is desperately needed. A lot of the people who've been working here, paying their taxes here in the construction industry are out of jobs. They're not going to be able to afford to stay here. Those people have families. Those kids are going to end up going somewhere else. So look at this very carefully. You have a major decision to make that has an effect on the overall impact. It's not just about impact fees that we're talking about today, because we know the growth has slowed. You're not going to get a lot of money from impact fees, regardless of what you do. But you want to set the county up so it has a balanced economy, that you have jobs, that you have construction jobs, that you have people who are working that are going to also spend money on restaurants and services and in the retail community. And you can't take all that away. If you increase these impact fees, I think you're making a huge mistake. I like the recommendation that Mr. Baird made, with one exception. And his recommendation is leave the impact fees where they are. Don't eliminate them for libraries, eliminate them for the waste department. But don't accept this study. Use the existing impact fees that you have today as your baseline. And then take the study and the existing program and look at that and figure out all of these issues that you've all questioned and move on. This study has taken a lot of time. A decision should be made so that everybody knows where it's going. But I believe a study should be established going forward to decide what are the parameters for increasing or decreasing impact fees in the future. What is our population? What's the economy look like? How many permits are being pulled? What's the school population? There should be established 5 or 10 guidelines that you can look at that are verifiable numbers that are out there. And the cost of roads is one of them. The cost of roads has gone down 50%. I mean, the whole impact fee study, in my opinion, is wasted. Now, that's just a matter of timing, but it's a function of the economy. But put in place something that's verifiable, that you can all look at, that's public knowledge, that says, okay, this is happening, this happened, this happened. I have a bunch of things that happen in Indian River County, and that's why I need to increase or decrease fees, so that it's empirical and not just based on the concept of new development paying for itself, because I think a lot of the money being talked about is to support existing development and mistakes that have been made in the past. And 2 wrongs don't make this right. If you haven't done what you should have done in the last 10 years, it's not fair to have impact fees based on future new development pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I just want to comment. I like to keep things in perspective. And staff, correct me if I'm wrong when I say this. But first, and this has come up several times with people speaking, that we're building these new roads for the people that are here now. But the people that are here now in the last 10 years have been paying impact fees to build these new roads to meet the capacity they've created. But we're behind the curve, and we stay behind the curve because we don't build the roads till after we collect the impact fees, after they build their houses, after they move in, and when the roads are overcrowded, and then we get the money in place to go and build the new roads. Secondly, it's come up a couple of times about property tax. We do not spend any money from ad valorem taxes on infrastructure and capital improvements because of growth. That's coming out of impact fees, gas tax, and sales tax. So regardless of, your taxes being half of what your neighbors are and they pay higher taxes, and that's something that the state and the voters of the state of Florida in '95 created. But I just want to put it in perspective that this isn't about ad valorem tax dollars and who's paying more taxes the way we pay. But if we don't have impact fees, then you're going to be paying for the roads with your ad valorem tax dollars. So I just want to make sure that, am I wrong?
No, it's a continual education process
Yes.
to state over and over again in simple terms.
That's right.
So, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Paladin. My name is Chip Landers, 1636 51st Court, and I appreciate you all investigating, deliberating, and just plain reviewing this whole process ad nauseum for everybody. But listen, we've all been here. I sat on the Impact Fee Committee and also the school subcommittee. It's been a long road, but it's been very educational for all of us, those of us who are in the real estate industry, those of us who are in the government industry as well. There's a lot of new information that's come out, and we appreciate your review of that. I will speak specifically regarding the school situation, and it has been elaborated on today. We had one comp that was used on that study at $95,000 an acre, which was a bad comp. In the real estate industry, you don't use one comp. Now that we're aware that we have free sites, and they are free, they've been donated by developers as required per your review process. Some of them, such as Waterway, I believe it's Millstone Landing, Bob, down South County. There's land there, so that should be into the computations that we have. The portables that are out there are a waste of money. It's $7 million this year in the school board that they're spending on that, and they are now building a middle school to take away 30 portables out of the Sebastian Middle School and 20 out of the Gifford Middle School. Are they a fact of life? Yes, because you can't build a school until the kids are there, but the impact fees that are being generated, as was stated by the school district, are inconsequential, and maybe the next step is to get rid of the school impact fee completely. But the school district has sent 2 separate letters to you all stating that they are not in favor of increasing these impact fees.
Well, just for clarification here, a letter won't do it.
Well, I understand that, but when the school board is being blamed for this study originally, that is the case. And having sat on that, I've seen the backup material on it. There was a request from a school board member who is no longer on that school board. Land costs, Mr. Wheeler, have declined dramatically, so I'm hoping that our right-of-way acquisition costs will go down dramatically. Sir, I'm in the industry, and maybe we need some better negotiation going on, but you're looking at 25 to 35% decrease in land costs. That is a fact in our industry right now.
That has not been the case when we're buying right-of-way.
Well,
in fact, it's been the opposite.
Then, again, reviewing the negotiation process that we have out there. The number of building permits, well, I deal with it every day. Mr. Keating, how many building permits have been issued so far for the year?
Actually, I don't have the number, but generally, single-family building permit activity is down about 62%.
Okay, so the actual number from last year was about 1,000 permits?
Yeah, last year I think we did 892 single-family building permits in the unincorporated county, and that's applications.
So we'll have about 500 permits this year.
We're not down 62 from last year. We're down 62 from the peak. We're down a little bit from last year.
Okay. So let's again say 600, 700 permits, down dramatically from those numbers. But the numbers based on that, your revenues, and I've seen the sheets, so I'm not sure where these are coming from. The annual revenues off of the impact fees are based on how many permits. It says $34 million in fees based on this. So how many permits was that based on?
Yeah, I don't think you can base, that. You've got commercial, right, which is one big building permit, and you got to be careful with it because that'll generate larger dollars. And so you have to be careful when you look at that number. But I'd say if you took roughly the 36% of 800, you're roughly sitting at 300 building permits this year for residential.
Right. Well, just my quick math here, let's say it's 700 permits, which I think is very optimistic. But at 700 permits at about $10,000 right now, the current fees, that's around $7 million, is it? You got to help me with my math here. It's dramatically down, so raising them of whatever it may be, if you decide to do that with a dramatic decrease, is still going to be a decrease on that. So I'm not sure why we're spending the time that we are, because increasing them is going to decrease the permits even further. I'm not going to build, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to build, I'm going to not generate that sales tax either. That's a choice that you make. That's a choice that I make as well. And I've said this before. I'm building a house right now. You raise the fees $11,000. I will take $11,000 out of my construction costs, not spend that on sales taxes that are generated, not going to those subcontractors, because I can afford to do that. Some people will not be able to afford to do that. But that's my point. This is not just a raising of impact fees. It's a sales tax issue as well. So I would encourage you, as the school district has done twice, not to raise these fees at this point in time. And also I would encourage you, as Mr. Wright has said, to form, let's say, a continuing citizen committee for review of these impact fees on a ongoing basis for more timely analysis. As times get better, we can afford a little bit more. As times get worse, unfortunately, we cannot afford it at this point. Thank you.
Mr. Landers, I just want to clarify one thing, is that at break, there's been several things said about the school impact fees. I was told by one gentleman that they don't want them. I was told by you they don't want to increase them. I think you need to go to the school board and have them have an actual vote, because we need an actual vote of the school. We can't implement school board impact fees without them voting to do it. And if they really don't want to do it, they've got to have a vote. Can't be a consensus. I think there was a consensus. It was in the newspaper. We haven't got written notification that the board voted, and we need that. And well, right now we were told to move ahead. It was in the ordinance, and it wasn't once. It was requested. So
saying what they're voting are two different things.
Yeah.
So I think that the board of realtors and the Treasure Coast Builders need to get it on the agenda, because I'm getting told different than we have actual documentation for or voting record for, and that's what needs to be done in order for us. All the other impact fees we basically are under the county, but it's implemented for the schools. If they don't want it, vote that they don't want it, and it will be eliminated. But they have to vote. We got a letter from a staff member saying they didn't want to increase it. A staff member can't do it, it's a board. So they've got to vote, and they can't be a consensus.
Well, and I guess and I think that's I appreciate what you're saying. I sat through the workshop meeting where the consensus of the school board members at that point in time was to send you all a letter saying they did not want them increased.
We need a vote.
I think they will have some direction now. Thank you.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yeah, just another comment, because we're going through this, and what we wanted was back and forth. And I just, from my perspective, and I'm willing to be corrected if I'm wrong again, but I want to keep things in perspective, not only for the audience, but people that are watching. I sat through several of the workshops, I think in 2003, maybe it started in 2002 for the impact fees that we adopted back then. And I sat out here in the audience and I watched a lot of the very same arguments that I hear today about we can't afford it, they aren't going to build houses, it's going to hurt the economy. Well, that was in 2004. It sure didn't stop anybody from building houses, because that's why, and I'm being a little facetious, but maybe they were too low, and that's why we've got about 3,000 houses in inventory now that aren't being sold that are new. And then on top of that, the setting commission at that time, I believe, cut the percentage back and then phased it in with percentage increases over a 3-year period. And then the next commission came on board and moved that up to where it should have been originally. And Bob, you may remember the percentages and numbers better than I.
And when was that?
That was in 2003. And
when was the final?
Well, they adopted it, I think, in 2003. It might have been 2002 or 2003, because it was before I took office. And then after I came in and we had a different commission, we brought the impact fees back and eliminated, I think, the last year phase-in and raised them up where they were. I think 2003, 2004.
No. When did we do that? The other part of it that you're talking about. I remember doing it.
Yeah, I think in 2000, probably 2005.
Okay.
But at any rate, they built thousands of houses in this county in the last 5 years with the impact fees. And again, the same arguments were being made back then that they're being made today. And I understand that nobody likes to raise prices. I don't like to raise prices. But there's a responsibility. We got to pay for this stuff somehow. And impact fees seem the most logical to me. Ask the chairman. I don't have a problem with it.
Go ahead, Karen.
Okay.
The difference is, in the real world in 2003 and 2004, it was a $100,000 house that you turned around and they sold for $200,000. Now, it's a $200,000 house that they're selling for $125,000. So you can't build it if you go that much further on there. That's the difference in the markets right now.
Well, my point is the arguments were the same, and
Next, name and address for the record, please.
Joseph Paladin. I live at 6450 Tropical Way in Vero Beach, Florida. There's been a lot said here today on various items. A lot of what was said today really has nothing to do with the cost of an impact fee. As far as when it's paid, Mr. Williams is gone, but the new houses out there that are being sold, those impact fees were paid when the permits were pulled or when the concurrency was vested. It's the same way with what Mr. Wheeler just said. Those impact fees are paid, way before the house is finished. They're paid when that permit's pulled or maybe even years before when you vest. It's kind of simple. Impact fees are earmarked for certain things, and they can only be paid and spent on those things. You can't use impact fees to subsidize various things. They have to be spent for what they were paid for. I mean, that's the law, that's the rule, and that's the way we've always done it. One of the things I think is a fact that we really is very important is what Mr. Baird's always said and done is that we've never spent ad valorem taxes for infrastructure. We do use a blend, which takes into some of that consideration of paying for various things besides just new roads. We do use a blend. We use our gas tax, we use our optional sales tax, and we use impact fees. But that's all we use. Now, the impact fees only pay about 47%, as Mr. Wheeler, Commissioner Wheeler brought up. But that's a high rate. It may sound like, well, it's only 50% of what it should be, but that's not really true. Compared to what a lot of other counties' percentages are of their impact fees, it's very high. But the point is, the blend that we use for financing infrastructure has kept us from ever using our ad valorem tax. So I think that's a good process. And the bottom line is, if we have less money, we build less roads. That's the way it should work. We have more money, we build more roads. We have less money, we maybe have less level of service. One has to balance out the other. So my question would be today is we all, I think, want the same thing. Our biggest question has been, and the commissioners have agreed with this in the past, is we'd like to see a way that we could reduce the amount of impact fees on commercial or industrial development to kind of inspire a job base here so we get more good paying jobs here and maybe buy up some of this inventory that's out there. And we all agree with that. We really don't know how we're going to go about doing that because we just can't decide to do it or we do it today. Reduce it 50%. We have to have a formula to justify that. And we don't have that formula right now. Now, my question would be to Mr. Keating, who's probably going to be in charge of trying to make this happen to a point, would it be easier to develop that formula, adopting this package and going forward and trying to get to that point, or would it have no bearing on it?
Well, I think staff's position is a study should be adopted. Whether or not you implement the fees right now, it should be adopted. And if we're going to go and look at alternative formulas, we can do that.
And I think that's really, in my eyes, and the people that work with me, that's probably the most important thing we'd like to see ourselves work towards. If we can work forward to getting those fees reduced on commercial industrial, that's extremely important to all of us. It's extremely important to me. It's extremely important to y'all and the future of the county to create jobs here. Whether we adopt these impact fees at this rate or whatever rate in 18 months or now, I don't think should really be a real negative on your part if we wait 18 months. There's really nothing happening now. There's not that much being done anyway. I don't think we're losing that much money by waiting for the 18 months to put them into effect. And on the other hand, if we adopted them right now, you could come back to me and say, well, Joe, there's not much being done now, so what difference does it make? So you have the pros and cons of it. But I think we can't lose perception of what our goal is. Our goal is to get to the point of reducing commercial industrial impact fees so we can have an incentive program to try and bring some jobs into this area. And residential impact fees are what they are. But I don't think that we really understand the recapture rate. I really don't think we understand the pass-by rate, the detour rate. Mr. Moore understands it. Mr. Keating probably understands it, and I like to think I understand part of it. But a lot of things have been changed over the past couple of years since we've got these consultants' reports, and they've adopted a lot more processes that we don't understand have been put into effect. And I think that if we could take all that information that we've gathered from these consultants and go back and maybe verify some of the basis numbers, I think maybe we could get to the outcome where we want to get. So, you know, what's the percentage of what we're trying to get here out of this meeting today is what I'd like to bring forward. We're trying to decide whether or not we're going to adopt impact fees. We're trying to decide whether or not they're going to be at this rate. And we're trying to get to a point where Mr. Keating can change the formula or get a new formula to get to where we want to be. So I'd like to get to that point and find out exactly where we're going to finish today and how we're going to come out of this today. If you could kind of maybe clear some of that up for us today. Thanks.
Anyone else? Yes.
My name is David Etter. I live at 1351 Seahawk Lane. I think I'm going to pull a Penny Chandler. I am on the board of the Treasure Coast Builders Association, but I'm going to speak not as a board member. I'm going to speak as a resident, a taxpayer, and a local builder. I called a bunch of our subcontractors up and our vendors up over the last week to try packing the audience here and stacking the decks in our favor. It was a very rude awakening for me because virtually none of our subcontractors, our suppliers, our trim suppliers, our door suppliers, our roofing material suppliers had any idea how much it cost me as a builder to pull a permit to build a house. Our pool guy says, well, it only cost me $200 to pull a pool permit. Well, I'm paying him $200 for it. And one thing I'd like to see for your education and my education whenever we have these discussions is not just looking at fees in isolation. I'd like it to be the total amount of checks that I as a builder have to write to pull all the permits, pay all the impact fees to build a house. And it turns out to be a fairly surprising number. I think it's around $16,500 for a 3,500 square foot house. But I'm not sure. I can't find out because I didn't get through to everybody. I couldn't get any of my subs or suppliers to come in. One showed up here on his own. The one I didn't call showed up, so I'm probably not a good salesman for it. They were surprised. They care vitally. I think part of the reason some didn't show up were they've laid off so many people. They're too busy to do things. A couple I called up, their phones were disconnected. So from a business standpoint and business incentive standpoint, now's probably not the time to do it. But what I'd like to do is pull back a little bit and not plead a case pro or con. I think it's very important that we do pay our cost. But I'd like to go back a little bit in history in discussing how we think about cost. It wasn't that long ago, a year and a half ago, there were lots of meetings going on in Joe's office talking about expanding US 1. And the debates were, oh, is it going to be $150 million, $200 million, $250 million? How are the developers going to pay it? We had a group of 21 developers that had projects impacting that section of the road that we'd have meetings on where we'd get together and what are we going to do? Well, I think my partner and I might be the only developers left of that group. They're gone. Their developments are in foreclosure. They aren't happening. But the important point of it is we were looking at a huge cost, and whether it was $100 million or $200 million in cost for sections of roads, reality began to set in as people thought about it, and people looked at roads. We looked at how the county came up with the capacity of roads. We did a synchro study, and all of a sudden we realized there's excess capacity on the road. We, at this time, don't have to spend the $200 million. In fact, if I recall the figures, there's probably capacity for about 4,000 more homes or 4,000 more trips. As we go through this process, we have a couple-year breathing period before building starts back, even on our smaller level before it starts back, because the banks aren't lending money to me as a developer. They aren't lending money to my home buyers to buy homes very easily. Let's take the time to look at the comp plan, to look at how we're calculating things, to come up with formulas that make sense with an overall vision, because whether you raise impact fees now or later, I think we do have to come up with the right way to figure cost. And some of the sprawl promoting aspects of our comp plan and the way we're looking at things have such a dramatic impact on cost that we have to think about it. And we have an opportunity now. And I'd like us as a county and you as a commission to take the opportunity to think about what you want, how we figure out what that's going to cost, and then we'll pay for it. Ultimately, the home buyers are going to pay for it. Then one last comment, which I have to make, and unfortunately the gentleman's gone. I get really tired about some of the fairness arguments. Usually the fairness doctrine on sales taxes and real estate taxes paying for things are made by people that have been living in a house for a long time that did not have impact fees when their house was built, and they are paying a whole bunch less in real estate taxes. If their house is worth $1 million, they might be taxed on $100,000 worth of it. Whereas if I buy $1 million house, my taxes are very high. And yes, that doesn't go to road costs, but that goes to upkeep, building buildings, salaries for everybody, and all that. And in terms of fairness, I think they have to look at both sides of it, because real estate taxes did pay for the roads that allow them to drive to and from their homes. Thanks for your time. You have a hard decision, and I thank you for really taking the time to think about it.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Good morning. Jeff Thompson, 2307 Seville Avenue. I can't argue the methodology. I can't get into all those numbers because I can't comprehend them all. What I do know how to do, though, over the past couple weeks, we've collected over 430 signatures from Indian River County residents that are opposed to raising any impact fees. I hope this commission will consider the silent majority that is not in favor of any increases. I feel that adding a 72% increase to the cost of building a house will push the affordability out of reach of a lot of home buyers. You know, you take that $9,000 and spread it out over 25 to 30 years, it just becomes quite expensive. The local construction industry at this point probably needs an IV, not a gallows. Commissioner Wheeler talked about, doing something to attract more businesses. There's something you 5 people can do at any time, is an increase the budget of the Economic Development Department or Division of the Chamber of Commerce. You got one person down there, trying to attract business into this community. They could certainly use some help. You look at St. Lucie County and Brevard County, and I think their budgets dwarf what's allotted by this commission. And I know it's not all coming from y'all. Some, they have industry partnership which contributes, but to get more business into this community, we need to do more as a community. And I believe a lot of it starts with the 5 members of this board. I'd like to leave this petition. It's something I drafted up, and I hope you all take a look at it. And I can certainly collect a lot more signatures if I have more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Commissioners. Nancy Offit, 686 Dade Palm Road, Vero Beach, and I also represent the Treasure Coast Builders Association, so don't shoot me, Joe. Several things were mentioned today. I think that Mr. Don Wright and also David Ederer made excellent points that we need to change the debate. We don't need to say how much more or how much less should we pay for impact fees. Impact fees are a reality. The history of impact fees and the Florida Home Builders Association challenged them legally years ago. What have we been collecting, about 15 years now, Bob? In Indian River, about 15 years for impact fees?
Actually, 1986, so it's been 20 years.
Okay.
22.
All right. And the Home Builders Association and industry has challenged impact fees in the courts for many years, and we've cried uncle. They're here to stay. But we realize they have to be fair, they have to be consistent and evenly applied, and they have to be based on true and current information and numbers. And that is one reason why we ask you not to adopt the Duncan report, because we feel that it was based on Tyndall Oliver's study, which was rather flawed, and we're just perpetuating the wrong debate, if you will. We'd like you to go forward, leave the impact fees where they are, go forward, not increasing them, and I think we should talk to the school board, because they also, I was part of that committee when they did represent that they did not want an increase in fees, and they mentioned because their own teachers wouldn't be able to afford houses after a bit. But keep the fees where they are, use the time between now and the next, when the next study would be done, use the people who have served on the impact fee task force from the beginning, not after the fact, which was done this time. I had asked you probably a couple years ago now, or a year ago, to look at the way Martin County does it. And frankly, I know Dr. Nicholas is in the audience, and I thought he might have jumped to his feet when they were asking about Martin County, because he did the Martin County study. But in Martin County, the task force went in from the beginning and listened and did it point by point and discussed a lot of the things, the machinations that we're going through now was done up front, and I think it came to a more comfortable resolution, although I do know that Martin County did remove, Dr. Nicholas can correct me if I'm wrong, but they did remove the state roads, and that lowered the impact fees. Also, if you would, if the libraries and the solid waste can be removed, remove them. And I think I heard Jason say, I'm not sure, that corrections, was that also something else? Was it someone who mentioned corrections fee earlier?
No, we need to keep the corrections fee.
Okay, well then I misunderstood. I thought someone mentioned corrections.
Yeah, I didn't intend to if I did.
Okay. I won't hold it to you then. And also, I think philosophically, and this is more for the people who've already left, they talk about growth has to pay for itself, and we agree, but as has been said a number of ways, growth has not only paid for itself in recent years, it's subsidized the existing tax base, I think. And before the 20 years that impact fees were collected, as Bob just said, those road and the infrastructure improvements were made, and the people who didn't pay impact fees then, including myself, must owe the rest of us a huge debt if, in fact, growth right now is required to make up what's perceived to be a burden. So I think the philosophy is, at what point does a community, does growth or new homes, the population, residents, build a community, create a community, and at what point is it decided that now they're a burden and they have to pay their way? I think it's sort of, that's the growth versus the no growth, and when did you get here, and that kind of thing. But I would ask you to not adopt the study based on its inconsistencies and some of the things that were mentioned. Keep the impact fees where they are. Use the next year, months, whatever, to work with, I hate to say hire another consultant, because I don't think it has to be done that way. I think we're paying a lot of money. Pardon? And just come up with a better product that we can all support. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this issue? Okay, commissioners, staff, any questions of staff?
I do.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry about that.
No.
We've got 3 questions to answer, just to confirm. A, whether or not to eliminate the 2 that y'all suggested. B, whether or not to do it now. When I say it now, as in any fees now or later, or 18 months or 24 or never. And then the 3rd one is whether or not to adopt the report. Correct?
Yes.
Is there anything else we need to decide today?
Well, I think there could be another one. I think, let me say that, I think the 3rd one is we need a direction from the school board, because I'll be on a voted direction, and whatever they vote, I think you should do. If they don't want the impact fees, they can vote, and we won't implement them, because it goes to them anyway.
Yeah.
Second is if they want to keep them and don't want to increase, we need a vote, because I've got letters in my file that are all over the place, from individual school board members, from staff that don't match up. So I think that would be one. I think impact fees are very complicated, and there are a lot of variables, and I don't think everyone understands them. It's a very complicated area. And, if you change one variable, you may help someone, but you're going to hurt someone else usually. So I think, we should maybe just accept the study, do not implement it for 18 to 24 months due to the economic conditions. I mean, I think that if we're getting very little impact fee revenue in now, I think if you increase it, it'll slow construction, hurt employment, and you're going to get less revenue in. So I think you accept the study, eliminate the library and solid waste, and then also get clarification from the school board. It's their money, they're going to get it. Have them vote what they want, and we'll implement that. Because it really doesn't go to us. It goes to them. Let them decide.
The other component of that, and I think I talked briefly with our consultant over the last break, is that you can adjust, and as Martin County has, and as we have previously in commissions, the 100% cost, and that, because of the economic future, we don't know what it's going to be. It can be a lot worse than it is today. Hopefully it won't, but it very well can be. That needs to be factored into the overall plan too, on a yearly basis or a basis as the economy changes up or down. We do really want everyone to survive this precautious time, and we want an engine here of business that is outstanding. So how we get there is important, and we do have the time to look at it, that was suggested, and get it right. And I think we ought to do that. Commissioner Wheeler?
Yeah, I'd like to make some comments. What I'm taking away from this, and I believe about 8 meetings in the last 12 months that we've attended on this, workshops included, and that doesn't include the several meetings that the task force put in. And this is complicated, but I've just got a list of things here. And, first, the dollar's weak, and we're in a world market. Secondly, sales taxes are down. Gas taxes are down. Impact fees have paid, as I mentioned earlier, about 47%. They get a 15% discount. And the cost of buying right away, from what I've seen sitting here, has not gone down in price. In fact, it's escalated because it's a threat of eminent domain. And there's huge appraisal fees, there's huge attorney fees, and even if we don't have to go to court, it still costs us, I would say, a minimum of 30% more than what the appraised values have been, and in some cases even more than that. That's a big expense that has to continue. I do still have the problem with the small business and commercial trip generation. I didn't see anything that, and I know the science of trips is, they're probably more accurate than I am, but my logic tells me that when I go to 2 or 3 places from my house that are across the street from each other, it shouldn't amount to 5 or 6 trips. I don't understand it, but I also think that commercial and small businesses are the backbone of the community. The other thing that I'm looking at is the fact that if impact fees go from roughly 13 to 18,000, wherever they go, houses have dropped over 100,000, and I think there's a net savings there on building, and it is the purchaser that pays that fee. It's the residents and the residential homes that create the demand that we need to build roads and so on and so forth. And the bottom line is who pays, and you know, I don't want to raise any fees. I was in business. I hated it every time I had to raise fees, but you know, my product went up and my inventory costs went up. I had to raise fees or go out of business. And even though we're not a business, we have other opportunities to create revenue to pay these fees if we don't do impact fees. But unfortunately, the only other place I know to turn is ad valorem taxes. And I think what happened and what Nancy said, you know, the people that did build this community and put the roads in have said, you know, well, we've paid for ours because we're paying taxes to build these, and now we want the newcomers to kind of pay an impact fee so we don't have to continue to pay for new construction or new capital expenses. And so in some of the cases, the increase in buying right-of-way is from individuals that are in the business that buy the property and then sell after it's rezoned and so on and so forth. In cases that it comes back and we have to pay a larger fee. We've had some of those discussions in the past. And with that, I'd like to make a motion. And I'm going to move that we take option 2, which is to approve the study as presented and increase the fees as recommended by the consultant with a couple of changes. I'd like to see libraries and solid waste come out. From talking to staff, it's not a great deal of money, and it's not something that's an urgent need, and we're doing quite well with that right now without those 2 fees in there. I'd also like to I'd like to reduce the commercial, and this is an arbitrary number because I don't know, but I'd like to reduce the commercial by an additional 15% because of the trip generation that I'm not, I don't know if we can do that legally or how we would do it, but I'd like to see that be reduced. And also go back to the school board, and if they want to vote to take this out, we can reduce that number, which is one of the larger numbers, from the impact fee. But I think they need to address the issue as we have and give us direction. But that's my motion.
We haven't gone up and down like we usually do and ask last questions or staff.
Well, my motion's still on the floor.
I understand that. I'm just clarifying that you've done that. Commissioner Davis, do you have anything of staff?
No.
At this point? No?
No, just, I mean, this is all over the board. And, I mean, exactly what Commissioner Wheeler just said as far as, you know, what we've got to pay for right-of-way. Yes, we do buy right-of-way. But then again, we get a lot of free right-of-way. When I say free right-of-way, we extract it whenever somebody comes in for development or something along those lines. Are those zeros calculated into it? You know, and then to some of the comments that were made by Commissioner Wheeler really made me feel like, wow, do we even have an impact fee system in place? It made it sound like we didn't even have one. And that's clearly not the case. Where I think I'd rather go with this is to find common ground where we can. And we can find common ground by eliminating and almost do this in about 3 or 4 different stages. I agree with the 15% reduction. I agree with doing away with the solid waste. I don't agree with the report. And you know, I would like to see it break down probably in that fashion if we could, and just almost do these on a one-on-one individual basis, because there's too much in his motion. Some I liked, some I didn't like.
Thank you. The 15% reduction, but that's at 100% cost of construction?
Well, we already give a 15%. The other would be a 15% on top of the impact.
Could you talk into the mic, please, so the audience can hear?
The 15% I'm suggesting is on the impact fee for commercial. which would be 15% off from wherever the tables show that would be, depending on what the commercial.
And I'm throwing on the table that Martin County, and we have the commission, not our commission, done previously, we have not assessed at 100% commercial construction cost.
The only concern with just doing commercial, and we'd have to get a legal opinion, is can we legally have, if you've got a study, can we legally have, because of economic development reasons, have commercial pay 15%? We already have the 15, it would be another 15% reduction. We just need that opinion, and I don't know if you can legally do that. And
for the record, Clancy Mullum, Duncan Associates. Yeah, I think that would be a problem. I mean, I guess there's a couple of options. You could reduce the fees across the board. Obviously, I don't think that's your intent. 15% for all land uses. You could subsidize commercial uses with non-impact fee dollars. But reducing the fees just for commercial would violate the proportionality of the fees to the impact. And I understand that the idea is that you feel like commercial has less impact, and obviously that's a technical issue that could be argued. But on the basis of this study, it doesn't give you a basis for doing that.
So, but we could have a study that does give us a basis.
Right. Yeah, we could relook at that.
Maybe we could accept the study and look and have the consultant and staff look at commercial, look at the different factors, the recapture rates, and see if we can't reduce it somehow. Look at some of those variables.
Actually, I was going to say just what my boss said. But I was going to say we could get Duncan and Associates is more an impact fee consultant. What we really need, I think what I'm hearing is you want a traffic consultant to come in and look at some of these independent variables. I think, as Joe said, if you could take action now, and we could meanwhile get a traffic consultant in, and he can look at independent variables like the trip rate and the trip length and percent new trips, which would give you actually the objective criteria you need to make changes.
One of the things that is really important before we get to the point of accepting anything at this point, I think it's the school system. That makes a tremendous impact or not an impact on what we're doing. When is their next meeting? Can we get on their
Well, I think
agenda?
we can accept the study, and it's up to the school board to decide what they want. We can accept the entire study, and since it's the school board, this money goes to the school board. It is up to them if they did want to do away with the impact fees, vote for it, because the money goes to them. If they don't want to increase them, they can make that vote, and we will go along because the money goes to them. We're just a conduit. We collect it for them. And I think you can accept the study, and it's up to them. I think that's the safest way. And then if you do want to look at commercial, I think we could hire a consultant to look at the variables on the trip lengths and recapture and things like that.
Can we accept the study and take out the commercial industrial component of it?
I don't think so.
It's either an up or down.
Yeah, we run into legal challenges. Unfortunately, we believe that.
Okay, moving on down.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I held back for the past 3 hours. I was listening to many words, and I truly appreciate everyone's time. And doctors, appreciate your input. You are well recognized in the community. Yeah, you can sit back for a minute. You're well recognized in your fields. I've looked at your work. I've looked at your work across the state, across this nation, and I truly appreciate everyone's input. I have some challenges. I have some challenges with the existence of the previous study, this study, and the explanation. As I was looking forward today to look at some more explanation of the methodology, I thought we were going to get right into the deep scientific process of this non-empirical science that may have some opinions and views. Coupled with the fact that the report that's before us today is dated, I just want to make sure we're correct there, July 19th, 2007, is that correct? So at the time of that report, the citizens were paying less than $2 a gallon for gas. We're hitting $4. There was about 900 homes on the multiple listing. We do have some realtors in the room. I haven't taken the opportunity to ask them. I've done a little bit of my own independent study, as I did in your field. There are 2,995 homes in Indian River County that are available for sale at the current base, and that's multiple listing. Would that be fair to say? 3,000? And there's about 1,000 homes that are calculated for sale by owner, and there's between 750 to 1,000 vacant parcels of land that are for sale. And I haven't mentioned the foreclosures because it's kind of rough to tell. Nobody's really proud of those numbers, and they're kind of in different directions, and nobody really discusses them. Some Privacy Act about that happening. We're looking at a lot of this county that's looking to be purchased. And we've heard it today discussed, far greater in numbers and far less in price. And people are willing to sell their parcels for less than $100,000 from 2 years ago's price. I'm saying that we are in a position that we were not in when this report was taken, when this study was done. And it's no affront to anyone personally. You had the numbers, you had your direction, and you based it upon a previous study as a baseline, as is done often in the industry. You had to take a baseline. And again, I compliment you for doing what you had to do. Unfortunately, coupled with what has happened there, what has happened on January 29th, with what has happened with our economy, the timing could not have been worse. That's the bottom line. It has nothing to do with the report. I'm not so convinced that the report is the best for the county, but we've gone forward. I don't necessarily believe that I'm in a position to approve the report because of the timing, the capacity that was used as a baseline, and our current economic condition and situation that we're confronted with. Coupled with the fact that we've heard today about projects being done, we're at 50% of the capital project with impact fees. What indicator is that those capital projects were completely capacity driven? We don't know. We don't have that figure. I have not seen that figure. Unless I miss it, there's a lot of pages in the report. And I don't necessarily, if we've gotten that from staff either. And that's a major concern. I believe we have a sliding scale with more opinion than we can apply right now. And I appreciate that, but I also appreciate the time to be able to express my feeling, coupled with we're waiting on, or it's being suggested that we're waiting on the school board to maybe perhaps make another decision right in the process. Well, we're going to make a decision today. I don't know how many more moving objects that we should be able to be looking at and trying to grasp on as we're going forward with this county and this decision. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's apparent, and I'll steal a phrase from Commissioner Davis. This is like trying to nail Jello to a wall.
What?
trying to nail Jello to a wall.
Oh, gotcha.
I won't use his other phrase that he likes to use, but the Jello to the wall thing works. There's a tremendous amount of moving parts to this thing, and it's taken us over a year just to get here, where I think we all agree we haven't agreed yet. And there's a couple things we haven't looked at yet. You know, the oil is setting records on a daily basis, not monthly, not 18 months, not 24 months, but a daily basis. So our asphalt costs are changing daily. We haven't talked about St. John's new regulation require additional stormwater phosphate treatment, which will greatly increase our right-of-way and stormwater costs. And that's in place now and isn't factored on any of these road projects yet. So to try and sit here and say we can come up with a date, a time, a number that fits everything is an impossibility. I think we do need to make some decisions here today. And I strongly believe this, we need to give the building community some clarity moving forward as we go back and we look at this. But I think we need something out there that they can get a hand on. And one thing, Bob, just let me clarify too, is the updated record or the updated report does include the 4 single-family categories. We added one for less than 1,200 square feet to try to keep the affordable housing, and that is part of the report. If we talk about accepting
that's correct. Yes,
okay.
That's what was in our last staff report.
Okay,
yes.
good. And I fully support, and I've said it over and over, and Bob and I have had some discussions and debates on the commercial industrial traffic impacts, and I fully support doing whatever we need to do to look at that and make sure we're addressing that correctly. Pretty much agree with everything Mr. Baird said. I think we can eliminate the solid waste and library categories and transfer those dollars over to traffic. I think we should hold the level of impact fees at the current level with that change. But I disagree on waiting for 18 months or 24 months to do any changes going forward. I think if we wait 2 years and all of a sudden we say, hey, now we're going to bump this impact fee a big amount, the builders, the realtors will be screaming even louder then, because they may have started a project based on certain cost analysis, and all of a sudden in 2 years we're going to say, hey, by the way, that's going up 80%. Sorry, you already got dirt in the ground moving. So I would like to see us, and I think also at the same time, if we have a deadline date like that in the future, when there will be a significant change, that staff will get overrun with people coming in with building permit applications the day before that big increase goes in. It would just totally swamp us and put us in a bad position. So my thought is we accept the report as presented with the changes we've discussed. We keep the levels at the current rate now, and then every 6 months we increase the impact fee by about 15% of the recommended amount. So there's a gradual, systematic increase as we move forward. That would take about 3 years to get to the full 100%, at which point would be due, it'd be 2011, we'd be due for another update at that point. It would be an orderly, manageable, fair increase in incremental steps. It'd give the builders a vision so they know if they're going to pull a permit in a year or 2 years or 3 years, what their cost is going to be. And at the same time, it protects the county. A lot of these inflationary things can change overnight. We see that with oil, as I mentioned. We have to protect the county infrastructure from rising inflation. So I think if we implement this in very small, gradual, systematic steps, the market can absorb it. It's not a big shot all at once. It's a gradual increase, and it keeps the county moving forward, keeping track with inflation and these other costs that are affecting us. So that's kind of where I would be on it.
But you want to start the escalation in 6 months, not the slow escalation in 18 months.
No.
I would say in 6 months we would increase it by 15% of the recommended change, and every 6 months thereafter. So it'd be going up. Whatever 15% of 7,000 is, it's about $1,000.
It could be a lot worse in 6 months than it is today. And
well, it could be, but
But, well, you could, well, my question was, you could do the same thing in 18 months. 6 months, down the road. I think
that's too little. I think our costs are going up a lot more than that. If we wait 18 months to do a small increase is waiting too long.
Yes.
I think Wesley had a good idea, because there's about, at least in mine, there's like 4 parts to this motion. I hear Peter and I hear everybody else. And if there's some way we could
get common ground, then
well,
agree.
yeah, like I think we all agree on solid waste and library.
In fact, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion if you don't mind.
Well, no, he has a motion on the floor, and he has, but he didn't wait.
I didn't get a second.
I know,
He's
but
going to have to.
Well, if I could, I think
he might want to amend his motion and get a second.
what I'd like to do is make about 3 motions. One is to take libraries and solid waste out of the impact fees. That would be a motion.
Well, Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair, Commissioner Wheeler, that's not what staff's recommendation is,
Yes,
It is in Part 5, and
staff is recommending, I am recommending as staff that we eliminate solid waste.
But transfer the balance.
That's another part.
No, we're not. I didn't. That's what Bob mentioned. I don't think we should do that because it's a different percentage.
I think if you want to put that in or add that in the motion, we'll get to the,
Okay.
So that would be my first motion.
Second.
Okay.
Well, wait just a minute, please. Could you repeat it
Okay,
slowly?
my first motion.
Completely?
My first motion would be is that we eliminate solid waste and libraries from the impact fee.
Second.
Okay.
Discussion.
Okay, and you're not talking about transferring that dollar amounts to traffic, just cut completely.
Yeah.
Okay.
That may come back in later once another motion is made. Second.
Wait. Let's get done with one.
Have a discussion, please.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's ratchet it down a little bit.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Would you like to say something? Okay. Now, the part of it. Period. So you're talking about even if the rest of the motions don't go, we're going to do this currently.
Right. Another motion could change this, but this is my motion now, is to eliminate that from the impact fee.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Good. Starts off good.
The second motion would be.
That's a 5-0.
Yeah. The second motion would be is to find a way to go back to the consultant. What do we have to find a way to reduce the impact on business commercial property. And we maybe can't say cut it 15%, but I think there's probably ways to go in with the numbers and legitimately and legally evaluate that and find a way to reduce that by 15% or whatever they come up with. That would be better, because I just have a real serious problem with I just don't buy the way they count.
Let me ask you this then. Are you going to propose in your 4 steps here that we accept the report?
My fourth one will be that.
But we have to iron this out then now. Yes.
I think what Commissioner Wheeler is.
A minute, please. I'm going to.
Is just.
Mr. Byrd. Baird.
Got it.
I think that if you wanted, you can accept the report, then you're going to talk about implementing it. I think you can accept the report, and then we'll discuss, I think, implementing, or if you want to do that last, we can do it last. One thing I'd like to mention is if you are going to mention, if we're going to discuss looking at commercials, we should look at commercial, because we want to somehow give them the benefit of the doubt so that we can encourage economic development and look at all the variables, see if we can change those and hire a consultant. I think that's important. I think a lot of the community wants that.
I'm not exactly understanding what you said. Hire a consultant to look at commercial.
Yeah, a commercial
So
variables
a
that
whole
does
different
traffic.
project.
Well,
as what we're talking about here.
Yes,
it'd be a part of this.
No, he's saying different.
It's a separate thing because we're going to hire a different
I
kind
want
of
to understand
consultant.
exactly. What we're talking about here.
Commissioner Wheeler would be a different consultant, the one that does
right, but
traffic.
But it would be incorporated into this when we come up with that conclusion.
Well, we didn't.
Well, that will have to be done later, I think.
Okay.
Can I have a point of clarity on Mr. Wheeler's motion?
Wait
please?
just a minute, we don't have a second. Well, we have only got a motion and a second and a 5-0 on the first go.
Right.
Yeah,
And we're discussing this right now. And Wesley is on the floor.
Oh, I thought I was.
No.
I think that really what the way to do this is just like I had suggested earlier and that Commissioner Wheeler agreed with, is that we've already taken care of the first part. Now the second part is whether or not to implement anything in an 18-month process or not. And then to direct some staff, consultant, somebody to go back and see how we can lower impact fees on commercial and industrial. And then for the fourth and final one is whether or not we're going to accept the report. And I almost think that would be the way to do this in these series of motions, because quite frankly, I'm not in favor of accepting the report. I want to lower impact fees on commercial and industrial. And if in the event that I'm not successful in not accepting the report, I certainly don't want anything implemented within 18 months.
Well, then we're doing it backwards. We ought to up or down the report.
Well, the other way is to go through all this and then accept the report at the end with the changes, to include the change, accept the report and make the changes that you voted on prior.
I guess
he's saying you're saying for sure you're not going to.
I'm not going to
pleased with the report.
No, I'm not pleased with the report that I'm knowing that I want to change already.
Okay. For conversation discussion, where are you on that?
I'm willing to vote to accept the report, and I don't think, as a point of order, we can vote to implement anything. I mean, what are we going to vote to implement it? We're just something we pick out of the air? Right. Either we're voting to implement the report,
absolutely,
or we're not. So I think we have to vote on whether we accept the report or not.
No,
everything
Madam Chair.
else becomes a moot point.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
And my view is a little bit more consistent with Commissioner Davis's view. How do we accept a report if we know where it's not going and don't know where it could be going? How could we say, great job, this is the direction we're going, and then recarve it as we're moving forward? I just believe that this is a freight train for disaster. And you know what, Madam Chair, I think I got it from the Duncan website, and correct me if I'm wrong if you just want to come up there while we're doing this. A high tide raises all boats. That comes directly from the website, and I just have a tremendous fear if we're about ready to approve this study, we're about ready to take us a little further into the banks, and we are at low tide in our economy, and the bay is smelling, and I don't think that we need to bring us a little further into the drier areas.
Well, if
okay, Mr.
Madam
Wheeler.
Chairman,
Came right from their website.
Sure.
If I might say, I think you're correct. I think if you reject the report, I don't see how you can implement any of the actions of the report.
Well, we have already approved removing from our present, and I asked that question first, from our present impact fees, and we have voted to do that.
The solid waste and the...
Yes.
And I think that's okay, because I think that can be independent of the study.
And I hope you do, because I asked the question before we voted.
Right.
He did give a nod. But he did shake his head.
If you want to implement any of the other actions of the study,
Except the study.
with the exception, I think you can take those out and say, we're just not even going to look at it. We're not going to apply to the study at all, because we're not going to implement these two areas. But when you go to implement any of the other areas you choose to follow through with, you need to approve the study if you reject the study.
I understand exactly what you're saying, and we're not to that point yet. We haven't approved the study. We're in the point of conversation, and I understand that staff wants us to accept the study. I get it.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I make a motion that we accept the study and implement the fees. Now, from what I'm hearing here, that's probably going to fail, but that's what I believe we should do. And I am.
And it makes you a hero.
I'm very much against 18 months before we do anything with this. So if we got to take this as a step at a time and massage this until we get there, but my first motion is to approve this with the impact fees for all the reasons I said earlier. Weak dollar, sales tax, gas tax down, property going up for right-of-ways. And we're just sitting here going further and further in the hole if we don't implement these fees. And I don't care if we build 10 houses this year, they need to pay the new additional impact fee.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I move we not accept the Duncan report.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
For discussion, Commissioner O'Brien.
Well, I still support accepting the report, so I'll be voting in the negative on this motion.
Commissioner?
I just seconded the motion.
Any
I
discussion,
believe that
Commissioner Wheeler?
No, I've made my arguments, and I think we're making a mistake. We're going further in the hole. We need to move forward instead of keep dragging this thing out. It's been gone on for over a year now.
Okay, I don't think we're going in a hole. I think that we have time now at this point to slow down, take a second breath, get some common sense and some concrete numbers in here. I think that this community, particularly the business part of the community, but others think that this is not something we ought to build structure on. I am concerned that we've spent all this time, money, energy, and effort on this report, and we're to this point. But that's how it is.
I would like to ask Bob a question.
Yes.
Just to make a point, I guess, but how many houses have been approved building permits in the last 2 months? Roughly.
If we're talking applications, that's what I usually look for, single-family building permit applications in the unincorporated county.
Thank you.
I would guess, I haven't done a report on this, I'd say maybe 80 or so.
And let's say that's how much per house would the increase be if these would have been adopted 2 months ago? He's got a calculator.
The full fee would be about $7,000 difference
per house.
Per house.
Additional impact.
That's generally because it's different fees based on different sizes.
An average of 7,000 times 80 what, Jason?
56.
Well, I think it's 7,000, but you've also carved out now that you've got different square footage houses and all that, so it's not that easy.
But he's taking an average.
$560,000.
$560,000, $500,000 we've lost. I call that going in the hole.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
You know, it's interesting because every road project we've bid out here in the last 6 months has been under budget. Every water project, just about every project that's out there right now, and that's at a time whenever everything's going up, allegedly as far as fuel and everything. I don't think it's good policy, and I'm not trying to set policy based on an abnormality in the economy. I think... And just, if I could, sure. I think that, you know, we did this at a time, we increased, and I was there whenever we increased the impact fees, and I think it was justified at the time. And that was a proper decision then. And I look at it now, and I tell you the reason why I justify it. Commissioner O'Brien provided some numbers here as far as some percentages of what's been paid for with impact fee dollars, and I asked staff to go and pull some, to put some lane mile figures to it and everything. The important thing to me is this: the widening of Oslo Road between 27th and Old Dixie, the widening of 512 across the Sebastian River to Sebastian River Middle School, and even the next phase of that that's gone from Sebastian River Middle School to I-95. Each one of those projects, they've come in and we're doing them, and we're paying with those approximately, from the figures that I have here, 57% in impact fees on Oslo Road, 88% impact fees on County Road 512 across the Sebastian River to Sebastian River Middle School, and then 62% of County Road 512 from Sebastian River Middle School to 95. Now, yes, we are using other dollars to go along with that, and I think that's appropriate, as a matter of fact, because there's some things, I think we've got a good balance right now. I think that there's no doubt in my mind that as a commission that we could have staff justify any numbers that put before us. The thing that everybody really is disagreeing upon is the methodology, and if they want to take advantage of changing that in a future date, I'm all for that. But right now, I do not believe that growth is inevitable. I'm convinced government can kill it, and I think this is the time whenever we're fixing to do that.
And the only comment I would have on what you just said is prices have come down. And I don't know the answer to this, but I'll bet you the prices are still higher today than they were 3 years ago, and the impact fees we're working off from currently. So we're still falling behind the curve.
Commissioners, can I just address, I'm just going to address the impact fee study. I think we can all argue about the economy. You can accept the study and then you discuss what you want to implement in the study. You're just accepting it and then you discuss what you want to implement. Do you want to implement the increase? Do you want to not implement? But I think it's important that you accept the study. I think this study is a good study. I believe it's a good study. A lot of people would argue with it's. You accepted the first study. I think so, and it's just an update on that one.
And again,
we've been arguing over this for a year because of the economy. We've had workshop after workshop.
And I'm not refuting the fact that the study exists and there was a lot of hard work involved with that study. I just, no offense, with the current economy, it appears that the study is mediocrity at best, and we cannot accept that for our county. Our citizens deserve more than that. Our future citizens deserve more than that.
We can't. We can't massage something that we don't accept. I think
that's the point.
We've got to accept the study and then decide what you want to do with it. The study doesn't implement anything. It just says that we're accepting the study, then we can start making some changes to it.
But the study is so encompassing. There's so much information in it. How do you accept such a large body of time and energy on an economy that has changed drastically, that our future has changed drastically? The past has even changed in this report. How can we accept the factors as a baseline? It just defies sense.
I would like also for us to get on the school board agenda immediately and see how that goes. But I do call the question now.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Passes 3-2 with Commissioners O'Brien and Wheeler opposing.
That's the end of it.
Get us.
Anything else, Father?
Yeah, my question is, where do we go now? Do we now authorize staff to have a whole new study done? I mean, where are we going now? You guys turned down the report. Where do we go?
I think
we can't do a thing now.
No, I think there's some excellent parts, and I think now what we've done is we've made it so the other half of the community will be listened to whenever they start to put together the issues that.
Well, okay, are you going to authorize a whole new $160,000 study?
I don't think we need to go through that.
Well,
I think
these
we've already
guys aren't
paid
going to
for
work
their
for
study.
free, Commissioner.
We've already paid for their study.
Right, we just rejected it.
That's exactly
so
right.
that's done.
That's
okay.
right.
So
And
now these guys are not going to meet with these guys for free.
Let's talk one at a time, please. Commissioner O'Brien.
I'm just saying, we paid for a study. We got it July. They've come for, I don't know, how many workshops and a special call. We've paid them to do the job for the study. Now we've rejected it. So we're starting at ground zero now. These guys, no, they're not going to work for free.
In effect, you've killed it.
No.
Yeah, we have rejected the study.
No, the way, let me tell you how I see
Commissioner
my
Davis,
motion.
please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. How I see my motion is simply this. Now we have the opportunity, we've got their study. We have not accepted it yet. We have the opportunity now to get with the individuals as well as those of us that think the commercial and industrial are too high and to modify anything in there before I accept it. I don't want to accept something that I know I'm ready to change before it even gets out implemented. To me, that defies logic.
Wait, folks. You're going to need an expert. You can't sit up here and take it. You won't win it in court. You can't take this individual out there, that individual, without having a consultant. You're going to lose your shirt.
Let's make it right before we get there.
I think you have. I don't think that you dare just take one person, that person, on a very scientific study and just make it a neighborhood project.
No, I understand that completely, and I think we really do. Let's don't imply that we're going to do that at all. We have had problems with this study and the previous study, and we do want to get it right. We have the time frame to get it right.
That's exactly it.
Any other further comments
for that? I mean, if Commissioner, if you'd like some direction.
Well, I guess we need to hear from Duncan Associates, because I think from their point of view, they got paid to present a study. They've presented it through numerous workshops, presentations, and we have rejected it. So I think you all are just assuming they're going to keep working on this. My assumption is they're not. We paid them for a study. They presented it multiple times. They revised it. They've come to all these hearings, and we rejected it So the question then is, are they willing to keep working for the same fee or not?
I mean, I'd have to go back and look at our contract. I don't think we've used our entire budget, although.
They haven't, and you're not packing up and going home, are you?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. You're professionals. Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Madam Chair, if we need some direction, I'll be more than happy to throw some direction out here. I think that Commissioner Wheeler's right on point with looking at how we can reduce, without accepting the study and then piecemealing it after that. I think the thing for us to do is to put together a study that does basically what we'd like to have done as best possible, and that is to temper some reasonable impact fees on commercial and industrial development. I think that, and if we need a motion for that, I'll be more than happy to make that. I think we're at that point where I've heard every commissioner say that except for. Well, maybe Commissioner O'Brien has. I've definitely heard Commissioner Wheeler say it, and Commissioner Fletcher.
Well, I think what we're concerned is you don't accept. You're saying you have to accept the data. You accept some of the data in the study, and you can utilize that data in another study to make changes. You're accepting the study, but you're not implementing it. Right. And you can have additional services to hire someone to make those changes, and you don't have to implement it at this time. That's the point I'm trying to get, is that if you don't accept it, you're saying you're not accepting the data and everything, and that data will be wasted. And that's our concern.
I disagree with that.
Okay.
I think that the data's in that study, and whether we accept it or not, it's still there, and we can make some decisions and good policy based on that to move forward with the intentions of that 15% or more reduction. That
you know what I'd like.
Jason?
Yeah, I have a concern here, and maybe the consultant can help me out on this. The Florida statutes require impact fee studies to be based on the most recent and localized data. I think we're beginning to stretch the bounds of most recent data. I mean, not less than a dozen times today we were criticized for using stuff from 2006 or some time ago, and some of those people criticizing it were part of the impact fee task force that reviewed it for 7 months. But, we're really getting to a point where if the data is 2.5 years old once we adopt it, I don't know if that's defendable, and maybe the consultant can help me out with that. But that's a concern that I have. Are we going to have to start over and rebuild all of the, the land values, the construction costs, the student capacity, all that stuff?
Well, I mean, that's a good point. And, a lot of the criticism of the study has been things have changed a lot. And, if it's been, a year in the review process and a lot has changed. And so, I mean, like I said, we have a little bit left in our budget, I think, but it's not enough to completely redo the study. But
We don't need to redo the complete study.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, I'm not sure where we go then.
What are you asking them to do?
Just a minute, please. Let's talk one at a time. I can feel your frustration, and I accept it. Yes?
If we accept the study and we pinpoint what we want to work at and we bring it back, that's what we're going to deal with. We're not going to go all over the place all over again for the 9th time if we bring it back. If we accept the study, give direction that we want to hone in on the certain things, the commercial development. We need to get the school board to make a decision. But then we come back and we're giving them specific directions. As Commissioner Davis mentioned in his motion last time, we want the right to look at this and veto, line item veto. And that's what we do if we accept the study and we give them direction to go back and look at the commercial.
And one point is if you accept the study today, even if you did implement it, the commercial impact fees are no worse than they are today. They're actually slightly a few dollars less than where we sit today with no study. So it's not harming commercial if we come back and make those adjustments later. I just want to make sure that in a revenue neutral scenario.
And I guess my suggestion is we can still do everything that Commissioner Wheeler said, just with exactly what we have in place. I don't see any difference.
And we will have to bring this back with ordinance, whenever something is adopted. Nothing could be final today. Nothing could be done. We still have to come back with an ordinance.
Yes, and we get that.
I think we've got some big issues that we need to address, and I don't want to accept the study until we address them. If I need to make it clear on what those are, I'll be more than happy to, but I think we've already beat that to death.
Our attorney, do you have anything you want to close with?
No, I think there's an opportunity to take the study if you do it real quickly, and if you feel there's some valid points from the other study. It would seem inherently to me that they could talk to each other if there's money in the budget and the billers are willing to put forth their expert. And if our consultants agree with maybe some of the assumptions, or agree to change that, their document wouldn't change, the integrity wouldn't change if you adopted some of the changes being presented.
Thank you.
But I think either way would work, and that's.
Can I just ask for a little more direction?
Okay.
I know you want to work on the commercial numbers. I think the big ticket item here is traffic. I think we'll deal with the school district and see if they want to eliminate that. That would be a great elimination. But in order to change commercial and keep the rest the same, we need to differentiate commercial in terms of how much demand they're creating. To do that, I think we need to get a traffic consultant in here, and he's going to have to do some studies and explain a lot to us. So if you could authorize, if you'd like, you can authorize me maybe to work with Duncan Associates or independently try to get a traffic consultant. We may have some contracts on staff currently that we can kind of use and expand on. But if you'd like me to do that, that's one way we can proceed from here.
Madam Chair, I think that's right on point. I think that's exactly covers the issues that Commissioner Wheeler had talked about. I believe that a financial institution on a corner of a street saves trips, especially if it's closer to where I live, and versus me driving all the way to State Road 60 from my closest bank. And I think there's some validity in every point of that, and we need to realize that. And that's really where our savings are going to come in, and that's really why I have heartburn with this whole study, or not the whole study, but parts of the study. For the life of me, I can't figure out and rationalize and explain to a constituent that aspect of it, and I just feel uncomfortable approving it.
I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll develop a scope of services. If the cost is under Joe's authority, I think he can go ahead and approve the study and we can get going. If not, we'll come back to you with the scope. We can either use our existing consultant, have them get a sub, or use one that we have and piggyback on. We'll do it. But it will probably take a while. It's going to take a number of months.
The only thing I'd add is that and I have no problem with Joe doing that, but I would like that at least on the consent agenda, so we know.
Hey, listen, with this one, I think, I really do. I think that this needs to come back, and we've got to see if it falls under the Competitive Negotiation Act, because I do, there's too many different opinions on the board for me to, I think I'm going to need a policy direction.
For me too.
But I think this is good government. We're not going to be pushed into anything that we don't totally understand and agree with, and I appreciate the expertise of our consultant and the professionalism, and I know you'll get us there.
Madam Chair, thank you for clarification, because what Commissioner Davis said, in my mind, it doesn't matter whether we accept the report or not.
Exactly.
So why don't we accept the report, and then we'll have a traffic study done to see how we calculate the impact.
Exactly.
I mean, so you're not debating the numbers then. You're not debating the road costs. You're not debating all of those numbers. You just want to see how we apply it to commercial, which is irrelevant to the study.
It's the or not part of it. I would rather have it in a package that I feel comfortable with before I accept it. And so you're right. It doesn't make a difference whether we accept it or not. I would rather not until it gets to a point that I feel like I can explain it.
Want it in order.
The commercial side of it.
Any other discussion? And you do know your marching orders? Yeah. Okay.
The only thing I would ask is when this does come back, that we restrict it.
Do we have a workshop?
No.
That we restrict it to what we're discussing and not just go through this whole thing, like I said, the 9th time.
Yeah. I think it's clear where we have issues, and I don't think we need to reopen this whole sore. I think that we've got some specific points that we can address.
What do we do with the school board? Give us direct. I think we need, with the school board,
Ask them what they want.
Yeah, go ask them.
Well, we didn't accept the study, so they can only decide if they want to go ahead with their current impact fee.
I'll make a motion that we ask the school board whether they want to,
Could you talk
be
into the
included or
mic,
not.
please?
We'll ask the school board whether they want to be included or not, and get a vote from them and take it, and then that's official.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes by vote. Joe, would you go
Yes. Well,
get on the agenda for?
yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, do you want to talk?
No, I'd like to have Commissioner Wheeler clarify the motion he tried to make on reducing commercial or industrial impact fees by 15%. He's talking about reducing them from the point where they are now, or reducing them from the point where they're going?
From the point where they are now, because I've never agreed with them.
Yes.
And I can't argue with these guys at their level. It's just that my common sense tells me that, you know, when I live a mile from someplace and I go to 3 places within 100 yards of each other, that equates to 6 trips. I got a problem with it. It just doesn't make sense.
I agree with that aspect. I just want to make that point clear.
Okay, any further discussion? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.